It's election night in America. We have another key race alert for you. Look at these votes in Pennsylvania in the Senate Republican primary. Former hedge fund manager Dave McCormick at 31.6%, just with a narrow lead of 3,472 votes ahead of Mehmet Oz, the TV doctor endorsed by Donald Trump, who's at 31.2%. That margin has been narrowing all night. Kathy Barnett in third place there with 24.2% of the vote. 72% of the vote in, 28% of the vote remains out. It really could be anyone's race. McCormick just barely ahead of Mehmet Oz. We're nearing the end of voting in two more states with key primary races. In Idaho, we're keeping an eye on the Republican contest for governor, where the Trump factor is once again at play. GOP incumbent Brad Little is being challenged by the state's lieutenant governor, the conservative Trump-backed candidate Janice McGeachin. This is not the first time they have clashed. McGeachin used her power as acting governor to ban COVID restrictions, while the more establishment Little was out of state last year. That's a move that Governor Little quickly rescinded. Polling places are also about to close in Oregon, where House races are testing the left versus center dynamic in the Democratic Party. In Western Oregon, President Biden made his first midterm endorsement in a primary, supporting centrist incumbent Congressman Kurt Schrader against challenger Jamie McLeod Skinner, who has the backing of progressives. We're awaiting the first results from Oregon and Idaho after polling places close just minutes from now. Now, back to one of the most critical races of the night, the Republican primary for governor in Pennsylvania. Let's go to Kirsten Hume. She's at the Pittsburgh campaign headquarters of candidate Dave McCormick. And Kristen, McCormick is holding on to a very narrow lead. What does the campaign have to say?
Yeah, it is getting smaller and smaller, as you noted, but advisors who are huddled currently behind closed doors with McCormick and his wife watching these results pour in, they are still cautiously optimistic. They are looking at the trend lines of the map, and they like what they are seeing. They are overperforming in areas that they believed that Oz was going to do better. They are performing exactly the way they thought they would in certain areas, and in areas where they're not overperforming, like the northeast area of the Commonwealth, those were areas that were Trump territory. They believed that Oz was going to do better there. They thought he would get that Trump effect, that boost. So again, they are remaining cautiously optimistic. They are waiting to see the election day results out of Philadelphia. They believe there will be a lot of information once those votes actually come in. Now, you can tell that while McCormick is behind closed doors, here the election party just keeps getting louder and louder. They are having a very good time and enjoying those numbers coming in.
All right, Kirsten, thanks so much. The race is razor thin. Let's go now to Jeff Zeleny, who's at Dr. Mehmet Oz's headquarters in Newtown, Pennsylvania. That's just outside Philly. Jeff, does the Oz campaign think they can pull ahead with the remaining votes left to be counted?
Jake, in an answer, yes, they do. And supporters of Dr. Mehmet Oz are settling in for a long night. They've been watching these returns, watching Dr. Oz's returns tick up ever so slowly against Dave McCormick. So, Jake, this race is ending as it began and as it has unfolded for the last several months, in bitter TV ads, in dueling debates. This is now a two-man race between Dave McCormick and Dr. Mehmet Oz. And one key factor still, Kathy Barnett, of course, she is no longer within striking distance, but she is still a factor in the race. And I am told by advisors to both campaigns that they are looking to see how she is going to perform in some of these collar counties as well. To see if she underperforms, that will impact, of course, Dr. Oz and McCormick. So the Oz campaign is still quite confident, and one reason why: election day voting. The McCormick campaign appears to have done better on early voting, but the Oz campaign believes election day voting, and of course that endorsement from the former president is keeping them in the hunt and keeping them actually very optimistic here tonight, Jake.
All right, Jeff Zeleny at Oz headquarters in Newtown, Pennsylvania. Let's go to John King at the Magic Wall. So, John, there are still lots of votes to be counted. McCormick with a razor-thin lead right now, just 0.3% of the vote. What are you looking at? Where are you waiting for votes to come from?
Well, you're looking everywhere, but we know, Jake, the bulk of the outstanding votes are here, where more people live, in the southeastern corner of the state. You see the map out here. The surprise for David McCormick is in these rural counties that we would normally consider Trump country, Dave McCormick more than holding his own. And if you just go through some of them randomly, you see 99% there. This is very competitive county, right? 30.6.3, but 99%. Most of the votes are counted. You move over here, a much smaller county, 65th. of the 67 in terms of population, with more votes here. So where are most of the votes out? You see 94% there. So come east to the southeast, and you see down here what Jeff Zeleny was just talking about. In Philadelphia City itself, 80% of the votes in, so you have the bulk of the vote in there. But Oz is leading here. Dr. Oz is leading here, so more votes coming in. He hopes to build up on that. Oz is leading where his campaign headquarters is tonight in Bucks County. Only 37% of the vote counted there. This is one of the most populous suburbs, the fourth largest county of 67 in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So this is why the Oz campaign says, good, still relatively close. You have to see how the margins go. Then you move over. Barnett is running a distant third. Almost impossible to see her mathematically pulling off a comeback. But to Jeff's point, can she be impactful? Dave McCormick leading now, but running third here in Montgomery County. Kathy Barnett leading, Dave McCormick running third over in Berks County. So as we watch the rest of the map come in, this is where the bulk of the votes are. So small smattering of votes out here, but still a ways to go, Jake, in a 3,000 vote race now, 31.5, 31.2 to 24.2. That was 8,000 not all that long ago. So a lot of math to do in a very tight contested race.
All right, John, voting is about to end in 2 more states, Idaho and Oregon. This hour brings new tests of the endorsement power of President Biden and former President Trump. And right now, we have a key race alert. In Idaho, it is too early to call the Republican contest for governor, where incumbent Brad Little is facing off with the state's lieutenant governor, Janice McGeachin. She's a Trump-backed conservative. It's also too early to call one of the key House races that we're watching tonight in Oregon's 5th congressional district. There, incumbent Democrat Congressman Kurt Schrader is hoping President Biden's support will help him overcome a challenge by progressive Jamie McLeod Skinner. Anderson?
Jake, thanks very much. Let's go back to Pennsylvania, looking at the close race between David McCormick. Let's put up the latest numbers that we have. David McCormick with 31.5%, Mehmet Oz with 31.2%. Chris Wallace, I mean, it seems pretty clear Kathy Barnett has taken away votes from Mehmet Oz.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that if she hadn't done as well, Oz would be clearly ahead in this race. I'm got to say I'm a little surprised. I'm curious to hear from David why it is that you think in some of these collar counties where we thought that McCormick was going to do better, in fact, Oz seems to be doing better.
Yeah, Bucks County.
In Bucks County.
Yeah. Look, I think that his appeal is a little bit mixed, right? He's being propelled by the Trump vote. He's also a television personality. They've been attacking him for being too moderate. So, you know, I think it's a mix of those things. But getting back to the other issue, you know, you look at these rural counties, and John King appropriately is saying McCormick's doing better than expected. But he's getting, you know, 30, 32, 33% of that vote. And Kathy Barnett is taking some of that MAGA vote, that Trump vote, away from Oz in those counties. She may be the greatest blocking back in Pennsylvania history here by the time this evening is done.
But you know, one thing. Do you think the fact that McCormick was attacking Oz and saying that he wasn't really conservative enough might actually, on issues like abortion, on guns, on Obamacare, that might actually be working to Oz's benefit?
And let me just point out, it's now 0.2% between them, 31.5.
Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting.
I think it could also, one thing we haven't talked about tonight about Oz is the people, and I guess this is McCormick too, but people don't think he's really of the state. And they kind of look at Oz and they say, you're a carpetbagger. I know that McCormick lived in Connecticut, et cetera. But they look at but they look at Oz and they say, you know, you're foreign to me.
It is incredible. It's 75%
still win
of
this
the vote.
race, though. We should point that out.
There's 1,700 votes apart right now, with 77.
And there is a
there are some significant counties out that could be good counties for McCormick. But this is clearly going to be a very, very close race. And you know, I don't think anybody can. You know, obviously we're not calling it. I don't know that anybody on either side knows exactly how this is going
but one of the
to go. And she's made this.
And this may go back to this point that was being made earlier, that the actual election day vote is favoring Oz. And to that, you may have to give some credit to Trump, who was doing robocalls and really
Absolutely.
pouring it on over
Well,
the
and
weekend.
also the voters who follow Trump are also the least likely voters to be using mail at this point and voting early. I mean,
Right.
they're the most likely to
Right.
be participating.
This was
And I think-
5,000, and then there was
And I
3,500.
think
Now it's
some of,
1,500.
some of what Trump is saying has resonance about, he says, look, he sold us out to China. You know, McCormick sold us out to China. That is something that has resonance. He's a liberal Wall Street Republican, liberal. He's a liberal. You know, these voters listen to Donald Trump. And, you know, in the end, the irony of all of this is that a card-carrying Trump supporter who went to January 6th could end up defeating his own candidate, helping to defeat his own candidate, which is, of course, something he didn't want, but it is an irony if that happens in this race.
I mean, we should, there are two things that we should, that have been said that bear restating. Whether this thing falls on one side or another has huge national consequences. I mean, Mitch McConnell, I'm sure, and Chuck Schumer are both watching this race very, very closely, because Pennsylvania could be the state that tips the Senate one way or another. And McCormick, I think, is widely viewed as a better general election candidate for the Republicans than either of the others. The second is, people will say if Oz loses that this was a defeat for Trump, and it will be a defeat for Trump. But it is still true that every candidate in some form or fashion was genuflecting to Trump, and that that 2/3 of the vote will either have been with, you know, or close to 2/3 of the vote will be Oz and Kathy Barnett. So, you know, Trumpism is alive and well.
Let's go back to Wolf in Pennsylvania.
All right, guys, so let's talk a little bit about look at how close this is, Michael, this race between McCormick and Oz. It's about as close as it can be right now. Either of these candidates could eventually emerge the winner. Look at this. McCormick right now ahead by about 2,000 votes, 31.5% to Oz, 31.3%. It's extremely, extremely close. So what do you think?
I'm interested in the fact that Barnett lost her momentum, because coming into the home stretch of this election, whether you rely on Trafalgar or Emerson or Franklin and Marshall, it showed it to be a three-way race. Mastriano wins by nearly 25 points, and I thought maybe he would provide a coattail for Barnett, because a Mastriano voter in many cases is a Barnett voter. But that turned out not to be the case, and so I buy into the idea that she really did harm Oz in the end. It's still too close to call. Who knows how it goes? But she faded amidst all the scrutiny that came in the 11th hour.
Yeah, worth
23% of the vote is still out.
Right, it is still out, and it is worth underscoring that the number for Mastriano in the governor's race, he's winning with 40+% of the vote. Barnett, to Michael's point, is down at 24%. I do think, too, as we look ahead here, I mean, I know there are a lot of Democrats that are watching this race really on edge, because now that they've selected, John Fetterman, and you and I were talking about this as we were watching this unfold, I think Democrats want to run against Mehmet Oz more than they want to run against Dave McCormick.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think they want to face McCormick for a whole host of reasons. He's a more traditional general election candidate. They would have loved Barnett, by the way, but I think that they would much rather face Dr. Oz than face McCormick.
Yeah, Fetterman,
yeah. Right.
And it's still very, very close. Could go either way. We should know fairly soon who's going to be the Republican Senate candidate in Pennsylvania.
There also could, though, be, depending on how close this ends up being, we could be in recount territory here. I mean, this could be something that does drag on for quite some time. And, I do think, Michael, the implications for Donald Trump here, David Axelrod was making the point that no matter what, Trumpism is alive and well here in Pennsylvania. However, he really did put a lot on the line here for Mehmet Oz. What's your sense of what that tells you about his decision-making?
Well, I thought it was really a shock that he decided to go in for Oz at a point when it seemed like McCormick was the more ascendant of the two. I'm still puzzled by it. There's no doubt that's why he went back for Mastriano, because he thought, uh-oh, I need to leave Pennsylvania with at least one W. He'll lay claim to that tonight. but he wants to go 2-0. He doesn't want to go 1-1 in the Commonwealth.
But you do think McCormick is a stronger potential candidate against the Democrat Fetterman?
I do, and you know, much of what's been written about McCormick is that some who've known him for a period of years don't recognize the McCormick who is now suddenly running for the United States Senate in Pennsylvania. Unlike Mastriano, I expect that if McCormick ever gets to make a speech tonight, he's not the same guy who's been running for the Senate. He'll tether much more toward the center.
Yeah, no, I think that point is absolutely right. I mean, one of the things I noticed when I was on the ground here earlier this week, I mean, you couldn't turn on the TV without being bombarded with multiple ads. I mean, we were sitting having lunch in a bar and saw the whole, basically, Republican Senate race playing out before our eyes, and it really was a race to claim the mantle of Donald Trump. That's what McCormick's ads were all about, even though he didn't actually have the endorsement. That said, it seems very clear that he can easily pivot back to being the kind of potentially pro-business Republican that a lot of people in Pennsylvania have backed in the past. I mean, Pat Toomey is very much in that mold, right? The retiring senator from Pennsylvania. He didn't want to have to face a primary in this kind of Trumpian electorate, but I wouldn't be surprised if Dave McCormick turns into that kind of a
Is Dave
candidate going
McCormick
forward.
one of those more moderate Republican candidates in Pennsylvania, like an Arlen Specter, for example?
Moderate doesn't mean here what it used to mean, Wolf, but yes, we have a rich tradition in this state.
Establishment.
Sure. Think Tom Ridge, think Dick Thornburg, think Arlen Specter, think John Hines. I mean, a hell of a lot has changed, but there's a huge difference between a primary and a general election. I know I've been saying that all night long. This is a primary. The general is going to be totally different.
It's going to be in November, so it's going to be between now and then. There's several months to go.
And let's underscore, too, and I know we touched on this briefly earlier, but the control of the entire United States Senate could very well come down to the race here in Pennsylvania. It's going to be big money. It's also, in many ways, Pennsylvania is representative of the country as a whole in a way that some other states aren't, because you sort of have all of the pieces of the puzzle, right? You've got big urban areas, you've got big collar counties, you've got a big, strong urban population. You've got a lot of people, independent voters here that can't vote in these primaries, who get their first chance to have a say in the general election.
And just look at how
and who
close
just aren't as political.
this race is, the Senate Republican primary right now in Pennsylvania. We're watching every vote as the GOP Senate primary in Pennsylvania keeps getting, look at this, closer and closer. The big question right now, will Dr. Mehmet Oz move into the lead? Anything could happen. Still plenty of votes out there that have to be counted. Our special coverage will continue.
We're back, election night in America, primary night. Let's give you some key race alerts right now. If in the Republican Senate primary in Pennsylvania, Dave McCormick, just 1,700 votes ahead right now, 31.4% over Mehmet Oz, the TV doctor endorsed by Donald Trump, who is 31.2%. Kathy Barnett trailing with 24.4% of the vote. That is just a 0.2 percentage point difference, just 1,700 votes of Dave McCormick ahead of Dr. Oz, with still 21% of the vote outstanding. So anything could happen in that race. Let us go out to Idaho now, where the incumbent Governor Brad Little is 4,651 votes ahead. He has 66.1% of the vote over the Lieutenant Governor, Janice McGeachin. That's only with 4% of the vote in. Let's take a look now at some interesting House races with Democratic primaries. In Pennsylvania, this is a Democratic primary for a House seat, the 12th Congressional District in the Pittsburgh area. Summer Lee, the progressive state representative, is right now, with 99% of the vote in, 40 votes ahead of Steve Irwin, who is more of an establishment lawyer type. Summer Lee, who could be perhaps a member of the squad, were she to ultimately win this, right now beating the more establishment Steve Irwin, who's an attorney in the Pittsburgh area. Let us go to Oregon now. In Oregon, Jamie McLeod Skinner, she is the progressive candidate, is ahead of incumbent Congressman, centrist Democrat Kurt Schrader. She has 66.7% of the vote. He has 33.3% of the vote. That's with only about a quarter of the vote counted right now. But still, Jamie McLeod Skinner, the progressive, up more than 6,500 votes over Congressman Kurt Schrader, who was endorsed by Joe Biden. So, look, the votes are still being counted in Oregon. The polls just closed there. But Dan and Abby, at least based on those results, so I got John King. No, I'm sorry, John. Based on those votes, it looks as though progressives in the Democratic Party are having a good night. But let us go back to the glorious Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, because right now it is so razor thin, with McCormick just 0.2 percentage points ahead of Dr. Oz. Where are we still waiting for votes from?
Yeah, we're mostly here in the southeast, but just look at the map and it just tells you this is a highly competitive race, and there's not actually a clear pattern, and I'll explain what I mean in just a minute. But 2,307 votes right now, Dave McCormick's lead. As you were going through those other states, that was down as low as 1,700. Erie County just flipped, meaning we're still counting votes here, but Erie County in the northwest corner of the state here, Dr. Oz was ahead just moments ago. Dave McCormick has pulled ahead a little bit there. It's relatively close at 600 votes right there, but this is what happens right now. So now we're in these very competitive race. The two candidates on top are very competitive. Kathy Barnett is a distant third, still a factor in the race, almost impossible to make up the math. But if you watch it play out, number one, we've talked about this before, Dave McCormick leading in so much of these rural counties. Now that's happening in part because what you see happening, he's getting 32%. The other two candidates are splitting the vote in what is Trump country, Pennsylvania, if you want to look at it that way. But so now you ask the key question. We're at 80% in a very complicated state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Here's one thing I just want to put on your radar. Number one, we're waiting for some votes in these counties here. But number two, I just want to bring up Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. You see right now, Kathy Barnett is leading here. Dr. Oz is second. Dave McCormick is third. But we may not have a final number here for several days. There are roughly, we're trying to get an exact number, we're told ballpark 7,000 votes. They had a problem, Jake, coding the mail-in ballots. And so they have to process those now all by hand. So that means election officials get in the room. Every campaign has to send lawyers in the room. We were through this in the presidential election. We've been through this in past contests. They have to go through and essentially rewrite these ballots because the coding was messed up when they were mailed out. It's not any voter's fault. It's the state's fault or the county's fault. But they have to go through that. So about 7,000 votes in this one county. If you looked at some of the early counties, Dave McCormick did well in the mail-in balloting. That by no reason means he's going to do well in Lancaster County, but we need to count those votes. So you're saying 7,000 votes to count there, and it could take a few days in a race with a 2,300 vote lead at the moment at 80%. So what else are we looking for? The reason I said it has no pattern is, look here. In this part of the state here, you have some counties where McCormick is leading, some counties where Barnett is leading, some counties where Oz is leading, and this is where, Jake Tepper, this is home for you, so you know this is where most of the people live, 30% of the population down here. In Bucks County, competitive, but Dr. Oz, this is where his campaign headquarters is tonight in Newtown, 32.5 to 29 to 24, only 37% of the vote counted here. This is the fourth largest county in the state by population, so a decent chunk of the votes have yet to be counted are here. Then you move over to Montgomery County, and again, Oz is leading here, Barnett is leading here. McCormick's running third, only about 60% of the vote counted so far in Montgomery County. This is the third largest county in the state, so a large pool, large basket of votes still to be counted. You come down here to Delaware County, only 15%. This, again, the suburban counties right around here, this is the fifth largest county in the state. McCormick is leading here, and only 15% of the votes in. So if you're the McCormick campaign, you say, well, if we keep this up, we're going to get a bunch of votes here. If you're Barnett, a comeback is pretty hard to look at, but you think we still have more votes to get here. If you're Oz, you're saying we picked this for a reason. This is why our campaign headquarters is here. Look, we're leading, and a lot more votes, which tells you we have a lot of math to do. And again, this is where most of the people live in the state, 30% of the population right down here in the southeast. Those three key suburban collar counties, all at the moment going for a different candidate. A lot of counting to do.
It's really fascinating. I believe that Pennsylvania has an automatic recount if the vote margin is less than 0.5%. Am I right about that?
I think that's the right number. I had to look. I had to double check it, but it's certain that sounds like it's in the margin. So the question, and then the candidates have rights as well to ask for either recanvassing or recounts. I think one of the key things will be, again, we'll see where we are when we're done counting tonight or in the early morning hours. Some of these votes. Remember 2020, sorry to erase all the therapy, but we go back through that. But here again, if there are 7,000 or so votes just in this one county, that is more than enough to say, you know, we need to wait and count. And then the lawyers get involved.
And then the lawyers get involved, of course. The GOP Senate race in Pennsylvania could potentially flip at any moment. We're watching it in real time. It's so close right now. Anything could happen. More votes are coming in. Let's squeeze in a quick break. We'll be right back. It's election night in America, and we have a key race alert for you now. Take a look at the latest out of the Senate Republican primary in Pennsylvania. Dave McCormick, the former hedge fund manager, is at 31.4% of the vote. That's 2,108 votes ahead of his closest competitor, Mehmet Oz, the TV doctor endorsed by Donald Trump, at 31.2% of the vote. That's still 20% of the vote outstanding here. And there only is a 0.2 percentage point of difference. Kathy Barnett in third place with 24.4% of the vote. Still a nail-biter, still anybody's race between McCormick and Oz at this point. Let's go now to the state of Idaho, where incumbent Governor Brad Little is in a Republican primary against his own lieutenant governor. Little is at 65.5% of the vote. He is 5,200 votes ahead of Janice McGeehan, the lieutenant governor, who is at 21.6%. That's with only 5% of the vote in, so that's still very, very early. Let's go now to Jeff Zeleny. He is at the headquarters, the campaign headquarters of Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, in Newtown, Pennsylvania, right outside Philly. How are Oz supporters reacting to this increasingly razor-thin close race, Jeff?
Jake, they're absolutely keeping an eye on the individual votes as they come in. Right here, specifically in Bucks County, right outside Philadelphia, as you said, only about half of the vote here is counted. So this is one of the central areas that both campaigns are keeping an eye on. But for the Oz campaign, they do believe that their trajectory over the last several hours, bit by bit, really inch by inch, is going to pay off in the end. They also are very well versed in the automatic recount, the rules here in Pennsylvania. A half a percentage point would trigger an automatic recount. We are not there at that point, but both campaigns obviously are thinking about that and discussing that. But as for the supporters here, Jake, they are preparing to spend some more time here as the votes come in. There's a possibility that Dr. Oz himself could come address his supporters. There's a possibility that this will not be known this evening. So a lot of scenario, and I can say as I look around the room here, the crowd has actually grown as the hour has gone late. And this race is ending and wrapping as it has gone for the last several months in a bitter duel between Dr. Oz and Dave McCormick. The conclusion is not certain, but we know this race again is ending as it has progressed a multi-million-dollar race here, a fight between the two men. But again, all eyes on these counties around Philadelphia. That's likely where this race will be won or lost, Jake.
Only roughly 2,000 votes separate the two men right now, Jeff Zeleny. Let's go to the other side of the Keystone State, to Dave McCormick's campaign headquarters in Pittsburgh, where we find our own Kristen Holmes. Kristen, what's going on there?
Well, Jake, we were just told to clear out of the way that McCormick would be coming out any second to address the crowd, that he wouldn't be taking questions. Now, this is quite a surprise, given that advisors told us that he wouldn't come out until the race was called. So we're not sure what to expect right now. But I will say advisors are not willing to yet say that they are worried, despite the fact that this margin continues to get smaller and smaller. They are waiting for specific counties to come in, just like Jeff said. They are looking for Delaware County. They are looking for more votes in Bucks County. And as John mentioned earlier, those Lancaster County votes, those might become critical votes. These are all areas that the McCormick campaign is watching very carefully. Again, they are not yet willing to say that they are concerned at all. They still believe the map is trending in their direction. They still maintain that in areas they believed Oz was going to outperform them, that they are outperforming him. They also believe in the areas that Oz is doing well. That was something that they expected, that is because of that Trump effect. So right now we are just currently standing here. Everyone has gathered around trying to figure out when exactly he's going to come out and what exactly he's going to say. But if his advisors are any indication, they are still viewing this in a positive light. Wait, I'm hearing cheering. Nope, that's not it. Oh, here we go.
Welcome, a son of Pennsylvania, Dave.
Here he comes, Jake.
been paying attention. We had a pretty good day today. Thank you all so much for your support, for what's happened across Pennsylvania today. There's been a huge outpouring of support. We knew it. We felt it on the ground. We knew it was working. We knew our message to take back this country. We knew our message was resonating with the voters of Pennsylvania, and they showed it today. And thank you. Thank you for the supporters in this room. It has been an unbelievable outpouring of support. We feel such friendship. We feel such love for the people in this room. So thank you for everything you've done. We feel incredibly blessed to have you with us. So thank you so much. Now we're gonna win this campaign. We're gonna win this campaign. And tomorrow, right now, we have tens of thousands of mail-in ballots that have not been counted, that are going to need to be counted beginning tomorrow. And so that's, unfortunately, we're not going to have resolution tonight, but we can see the path ahead. We can see victory ahead, and it's all because of you. So thank you, Pennsylvania. Thank you for our great friends and supporters in this audience. We love you. We're going to take back this state. We're going to take back this country, and it's because of you. God bless you. God bless Pennsylvania, and God bless America. Thank you so much.
All right, Dave McCormick, and if his wife looks familiar, that's Dina Powell, former Deputy National Security Advisor to Donald Trump in the Trump White House, speaking there. Announcing, saying the obvious, which is that we're not going to have resolution tonight in terms of his tight race in the Senate Republican primary in Pennsylvania. Dana and Abby, he is correct. We're probably not going to have resolution tonight. Last I checked, he was up by 2,190 votes, Dana, which is 0.2 percentage points of a vote, of the vote. They still have, let me look at the chart there. About 83% of the vote has been counted, so that's 17% outstanding. Plus, of course, we have that issue in Lancaster County that John King was telling us about earlier, in which there seem to have been some tabulation issues. So there are thousands of votes that have not been counted yet, Dana. So Dave McCormick saying we're going to win, but unfortunately we're not going to have a resolution this evening.
And I did not, I'm sure you had the same conversation, speak with one Republican in Pennsylvania or one Republican here in Washington before tonight who did not say, I am not making any guesses. This is anybody's race when it comes to this Senate race in Pennsylvania. I don't know that they thought it would be this close, but who knows? I mean, this is the world in which we're living. And it really does show that they understand this could be, a couple of days. Never mind the outstanding ballots that have to be counted, but also the fact that there is an automatic recount if the margin between the top contender and the one below is less than half a percentage point, which is very possible given the fact that it's only, 2,000 votes separating them right now.
One thing that I do think is clear based on where we are right now, it's that a lot of people, even experts in Pennsylvania politics, expected that McCormick and Oz would kind of, they would both explode. They would blow each other up, leaving a space for Kathy Barnett to rise. That did not end up happening. Instead, what you're seeing is Kathy Barnett making it a little bit more difficult to Oz to break through, but the split in that Trump vote is really the story here tonight. And if McCormick is going to, make it out of this night as the winner, it would be because the two Trump candidates, the Trump-endorsed candidate and the one who believes that she is the true heir of Trump, split that vote in a critical way, leaving an opening for a candidate who, frankly, in another cycle, in another era, would have been the type of Republican candidate that you would more typically see from the state of Pennsylvania. Right now, I think Oz and McCormick being neck and neck, it really is kind of the story of this Republican Party right now.
And Abby, to that point, that's exactly what the McCormick campaign, after sort of getting rattled by seeing the late surge of Kathy Barnett, I think both the Oz and the McCormick campaigns were sort of caught off guard by that. But as soon as they got their bearings, they saw what you're describing as their potential path, as their opening, that there would be this split between Oz and Barnett and this lane and avenue available to McCormick. But I think we should note what you just heard Dave McCormick say in that speech. Yes, there are tens of thousands of absentee votes to be opened and counted. We've been discussing this issue in Lancaster County. But given our estimated vote in right now, there could be like 200,000 votes that are still to be counted across the Commonwealth. There is a lot of counting to do, and the margin is so small right now. I think it is not at all clear yet which one of these guys is going to end up victorious in this race. I also just would say, I think it's really interesting to hear somebody running in a Republican primary in Pennsylvania, of all places, telling their supporters, hey, wait for the absentee ballots to be counted. That may be our path to victory. That's exactly what Donald Trump railed against in 2020.
Which, by the way, is the right thing to do.
Course,
should be clear. He is doing the right thing.
Yeah,
Kudos to him for doing
we
that.
want all the votes to be counted, and there's a problem in Lancaster County with some of the vote tabulation. There are absentee ballots. There's vote by mail. Yeah, we're going to wait for all the votes to be counted, whether it's Kathy Barnett or Mehmet Oz or Dave McCormick that ultimately wins this primary race. We don't want to take our eyes off this nail biter in Pennsylvania for too long. We are going to try to squeeze in a quick break. Stay with us for more results coming up. It's election night in America. We have some key race alerts for you. Take a look at the Pennsylvania Senate Republican primary. Hedge fund manager Dave McCormick still up, 31.3% of the vote for him. He's roughly 2,200 votes ahead of the next closest competitor, the Trump-endorsed television doctor Mehmet Oz, who has 31.1% of the vote. Kathy Barnett, who was surging late in the campaign, apparently not enough, however. She's at 24.5% of the vote. There is still about 15% of the vote to be counted. A nail-biter, really. I want to show you two interesting House Democratic primaries going on in Pennsylvania. In the 12th congressional district, which is the Pittsburgh area, Summer Lee, the progressive candidate, is up with 41.7% of the vote. That's about 534 votes ahead of the more establishment Steve Irwin. He's an attorney. She's a state representative. He's at 41.2% of the vote. But that's a very interesting race. And in this, at least the results we have as of now, with 99% of the vote in, the progressive has defeated the more establishment Democratic candidate, which is also something going on in Oregon. Let's go to the Oregon Democratic primary, where the incumbent congressman, Kurt Schrader, endorsed by Joe Biden, the president, in a rare primary endorsement. Kurt Schrader, who is a centrist, being shellacked as of right now, only about a third of the vote in, but still being shellacked by the progressive candidate, Jamie McLeod Skinner. Let's go to Jeff Zeleny, who is in outside Philadelphia at the Oz campaign headquarters in Newtown, Pennsylvania, where Mehmet Oz is about to speak to his supporters about the results there.
We've seen Dr. Oz walk in. Jake, let's take a listen right now.
So I thought we'd start off thanking the people who have been so dear to me throughout this process. Lisa has been the rock of Gibraltar for me. I think I'm running crazy to make sure you got a rock of Gibraltar for you. My kids are all lined up behind me. God bless you all. Showed up at every point, filled in the gaps, made things happen that were otherwise seemingly impossible. So, we're not going to have a result tonight. When all the votes are tallied, I am confident we will win. We are making a ferocious charge, but when it's this close, what else would you expect? Everything about this campaign has been tight. I want to thank my campaign team. they're over here scattered about, work tirelessly to make sure that we put our best foot forward. They taught me this area because I'm a heart surgeon. I did not know politics, but I've learned it under the tutelage of some wonderful people. And I want to thank some other individuals who are actually unbelievably close friends, made a big difference in my life, are always there at every moment. Let's start with 45, President Trump. President Trump, after he endorsed me, continued to lean into this race in Pennsylvania. He knows all the subtleties of it. He was willing to participate with teletown halls, which he advised that I do, was a brilliant idea. He participated in a massive rally out in Westmoreland County. And God bless you, sir, for putting so much effort into this race. I will make you proud. I want to thank Sean Hannity. Sean's like a brother to me. When Sean punches through something, he really punches through it. He understands exactly how to make a difference, and he's been doing that this entire campaign, much of it behind the scenes, giving me advice on late-night conversations. Again, the kinds of things that true friends do for each other. There's so many others I can thank. I'm just going to toss out a couple names. You'll know who you are. Mac, Perry, Carson, Rosenthaler, Ross. I can go on and on. But you all know who you are, and you know how I treasure each and every one of you. My parents were immigrants to this country, recruited to come here because we needed doctors back then. And they saw the shining city on the hill that Ronald Reagan spoke of. They were incredibly patriotic about our nation. I know many think that city's a little dim these days, but that's not what I saw when I was campaigning. I looked in the eyes of Pennsylvanians as I traveled across this beautiful Commonwealth, and I saw that light as bright as ever, raging forth. All it wanted to be was unleashed. And that's why I'm running for the Senate, to do just that. I'm running to allow us all to witness that brilliance. It's out there. We just have to be able to believe in it. We are a land of plenty. Let's remember that and remind ourselves, because we're a land of plenty, nothing can hold us back. Even bonds that you think are unbreakable, they can be torn away. Barriers broken and pushed to the side. We have the ability in Pennsylvania to fight for the soul of this country. We are such a critical part, a bellwether for the country, that when we win the battles here in Pennsylvania, it reflects on the entire country. So if the soul of Pennsylvania is thriving and healthy, so will the soul of the nation. And that's important, because when you go around the world, people ask you, can you save America? Can you make America as strong as ever? And I say, of course. Well, why do you care? And they say, because when we have issues here, we look to America and we wonder, my goodness, if they figured it out, we can figure it out. My friends, we are a role model to the world. When our city on this hill is shining bright, others see it and they make their cities bright as well. That's why I'm running for the Senate. That's why I'll be the next senator for Pennsylvania. And that's what I promise we will bring to the United States of America. God bless you all. I'll talk to you later.
Mehmet Oz, who is locked in a tight race right now with Dave McCormick, saying what McCormick said just a few minutes ago, there is not going to be a result, a resolution of this primary race, hard fought this evening. Dana Bash and Abby Phillip, really, I wouldn't put any money right now on this race. It really could go either way. There are so many votes left to count, and the margin that McCormick has right now is razor thin, 1,980 votes and shrinking.
Yes, and the fact that the first person that he thanked was Donald J. Trump. He said 45, the man who did endorse Dr. Oz and did so against the advice of a lot of the former president's advisors. And that's why he was doubling down, tripling down, doing these teletown halls that he was talking about. But it was curious that the second person that he thanked was a conservative personality, a television and radio personality, not the people who voted in Pennsylvania, but I think that's very telling as to where and what kind of campaign this is.
Look, I just want to put in a plug for We Don't Know about a lot of this, because what strikes me about this whole Pennsylvania Senate situation is that you have a lot of uncertainty being injected in this race. You know, what a Fetterman McCormick matchup is going to look like, what a Fetterman-Oz matchup is going to look like. You know, when we all talk to people on both sides of the aisle, I think all of them are it's anyone's guess at this point. There are a lot of factors, including Oz's celebrity and Fetterman's just conventionality that make this a really interesting race for us to continue to look at.
And it's important to remember, we're going to be having the same conversation in November.
Yeah.
This is a battleground state, and the Democrats see it as one of their best pickup opportunities in the country to try and protect their Senate majority. Which Republican nominee comes out tonight really shapes the contour of that race, and we're going to be talking about a really close race then, too.
All right, thanks so much. Wolf Blitzer in Philadelphia, what are you seeing?
Seeing a nail-biter of a contest over there. I'm anxious to get Michael Smerconish and Casey Hunt's thoughts. What do you think?
I said on radio earlier today that anyone who said they know which way Pennsylvania will end up tonight is lying, and now we know why. Who the hell knows? It took 4 or 5 days before Joe Biden was finally proclaimed the victor in the last cycle. Maybe we're headed that same way.
We know as much. Now, I guess we've got a little bit more information, but we're still in exactly the same place where we were when this went in. We knew it was a three-way race. Now we know it's a two-man race. This, again, big picture, important to realize Democrats are already talking about how they want to line up against either one of these candidates, and we are going to be having the same conversation in November.
Yeah, it's going to be a lively time indeed between these Democrats and these Republicans. Anderson, back to you.
Well, thanks very much. David Urban, you're a supporter of McCormick. What do you think?
Look, I'm still optimistic we're going to win here at the end of the day. I think the trend, we saw a trend where McCormick, kind of took the lead early, but narrowly, and I think that's where it's going to play out here over the next 24, 48 hours. Those vote totals are going to continue to kind of tally up they've been running, where McCormick ends up on top at the end of the day with no recount.
But I think where people are really nervous, or who's really nervous right now, is the former president. Now, McCormick had the backing of Ted Cruz as well as Mike Pompeo. And if he pulls this off, it proves that you can run without denying the election results, which Dave McCormick never did, never supported January 6th as kind of a mainstream, America First Republican, but without going down those conspiracy theory kind of lanes.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
Ben? Look, we'll see. I was very excited to see the progressive Summer Lee pulling ahead. She had, all the progressive establishment came out for her, but she had real opposition from the Democratic Party establishment as well. And I think you're going to have a star born tonight, Summer Lee, Congressional District 12 in Pennsylvania. All right, thank you all. Don Lemon picks up our election coverage next.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. There you see, we're all here, the big panel of experts, the dream team, joining me here in New York. I'm Don Lemon. We have breaking news on this election night in America. Results are coming in on a big night of big primaries in 5 states, as a matter of fact. Plenty of election drama, so make sure you fasten your seatbelts. Some of the hottest races, Pennsylvania, of course, in that Commonwealth. The Senate GOP primary, hedge fund guy Dave McCormick and Trump-endorsed TV doc Dr. Mehmet Oz locked in a tighter than tight battle, if you consider. Look at that. Just 2,600 votes apart. The Trumpiest candidate, really not endorsed by him, Kathy Barnett, trailing despite what at one point looked like a late surge, and people were concerned, folks in the race, that she might actually win or could win. CNN projects Doug Mastriano, a champion of the bogus big lie of election fraud in 2020, has won the GOP governor's primary there. And talk about high drama as CNN projects John Fetterman wins Pennsylvania's Democratic Senate primary. He is exactly where he didn't expect to be right now, though. Watching from his hospital bed, he's recovering from surgery to get a pacemaker today after he suffered a stroke on Friday. And then there is North Carolina. That's where Madison Cawthorn has conceded to Chuck Edwards. 26-year-old Cawthorn conceding after multiple scandals, everything from bringing a loaded handgun through a TSA checkpoint to accusing his own GOP colleagues of using cocaine and inviting him to an orgy. There's a lot that happened there. We're going to discuss that. And Jeff, I know, it's crazy, right?
Do not look this way.
I mean,
keep talking.
That was a lot, right?
That was a lot.
You don't want to talk. All right, let's talk about what's happening in Oregon, because the polls are closing in Idaho and Oregon, and they are counting the ballots in races, including one testing the former president's power and one that will be the test of President Joe Biden's endorsement power. We're going to bring you all those results as soon as they come in. So here with me, Charlie Dent. Can I say Bakari Sellers now? Because you said don't get here. Alice Stewart and Mark Preston. But seriously, though, it's good to have you here. This is an amazing and unusual evening. We're going to speak to all of you. But I want to get now to where it's happening on the ground. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is at Oz campaign headquarters in Newtown, Pennsylvania, and Kristen Holmes with the McCormick campaign in Pittsburgh. Hello to both of you. Good evening. Good morning. It's good to see you. I'm going to start with you, Kristen, because this race is as tight as it gets. We just heard from Dave McCormick. What is he saying tonight? I see you looking over your shoulder, so something's going on.
Yeah, I was just saying who was left here. They basically cleared out the entire area. McCormick coming out and telling everyone to go home, that the race was not going to be called today, that there were tens of thousands of mail-in ballots that still needed to be counted. One advisor telling me they believe it's roughly 80,000 ballots that still need to be counted. Of course, that's yet to be seen. Now, I will tell you that advisors still feel very optimistic about the way the map is trending. They say that they believe they are overperforming in areas they thought Oz was going to do better, the areas that they're doing well in, they expected to do well in, and the areas that Oz is actually doing very well in, they also anticipated that. So they like the way this map is trending. They are specifically looking at counties outside of Philadelphia, including Delaware County, as well as votes coming in Bucks County and Lancaster County. Now that's going to be interesting because there are roughly around 7,000 to 8,000 votes there that they are going to have to hand count due to a clerical error. So all of this might take quite a while. So that's exactly what David McCormick said tonight. But again, he's saying he feels very, very good about it, as are his advisors as they cleared out this room tonight, Don.
All right, listen, I want to get now to Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, from Kristen to you, it's only 2,600 votes between McCormick and Oz right now. He still believes that he can pull it off. Can he? What are they thinking?
Without question. I mean, Don, this is absolutely, it's more than too close to call. The votes simply have not all been counted yet. So we are going to have to take a collective deep breath, and Election Day is going to turn into a second day, perhaps an election week. This is something that happens in close elections. So Dr. Mehmet Oz addressed his supporters behind me just a short time ago. There are still a few of them milling around here. He's also predicted victory. He thanked former President Donald Trump, whose endorsement, of course, helped pull him toward the finish line. We'll see if it pulls him across the finish line. But he said this will not be settled this evening. It will be settled in the coming hours, perhaps days. So, Don, this is what is happening at this hour. We are in Newtown, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia in Bucks County. And as Kristen was just saying, this is one of the many places where there are a lot of votes yet to be counted. This is a strong area for Dr. Oz, but also Dave McCormick performed pretty strongly as well. And one thing that will be a distinction to keep an eye on going forward, early votes versus election day voting. The McCormick campaign had more of an early vote strategy. They did well on early votes, at least anecdotally. And if there are more early votes to be counted, that could benefit them. However, Dr. Oz, throughout the course of the evening, really ticked off some pretty impressive victories in Trump country, if you will, the area between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, winning some counties along the border with West Virginia, Ohio, Maryland. So this is a campaign that is ending as it began, and it has traveled throughout these many expensive, vicious months here. A battle between Dr. Oz and David McCormick. But even though Kathy Barnett is no longer in the running, her performance in many of these counties is going to be key as well. Did she fall off in recent days when there became more scrutiny of her candidacy? That could impact the race for both of those gentlemen as well. So, Don, this is going to continue tomorrow, and perhaps after that, we will just have to be patient and see how these votes are counted.
Yeah, you're right. Trump and Trump supporters really hitting Kathy Barnett hard over the last a couple of days. You saw it on conservative media. Thank you both. I appreciate it. We'll check back in with you. I want to get now to the man of the moment right now who can give us the breakdown on all of this. John Avalon is at the Magic Wall for us. John, I asked Jeff Zeleny. Mehmet Oz is hopeful. He believes he can pull it off. Can he?
He sure can. I mean, look, this thing is tight as a tick. Take a look. It's 2,600 votes. We're still 86% in. We've got votes outstanding all over the place. But if you want evidence that Kathy Barnett could be acting as a spoiler for Oz after the Trump endorsement, take a look at places where Kathy Barnett's in first place, like Montgomery County. Now, this is her home county. It's the third largest county in Pennsylvania. Oz is in second place. So you see that there's evidence that they are eating into each other's bases. And if you add those two numbers up, of course, McCormick's in a distant third, but McCormick may have been able to come through the middle. Take a look at where he's rising, which is surprising. Rural counties, right? Traditionally, rural counties are the heart of Trump country, especially in a state like Pennsylvania. McCormick outperforming in a lot of these rural counties. Also, something interesting to take a look at. This is coal country. Now, Dr. Oz is performing particularly well in coal country. However, McCormick is doing pretty well in suburban counties and also this base of Pittsburgh, where he grew up. So you see, McCormick has a lot of room to grow in some of the bigger counties in the state, but it's pretty clear that Barnett ate into Oz, and that's got to be driving the Trump folks crazy tonight.
Yeah, listen, that was one of my first stations that I worked at in Philadelphia, and we used to cover all these elections. You never know in Pennsylvania. It goes blue, red,
yeah.
So you never know what's going to happen. If not for Barnett, where would Mehmet Oz be right now, do you think?
You got to say, again, for reasons I just showed, that Kathy Barnett has taken away from Oz's total. If Kathy Barnett hadn't been eating into Oz's total, you'd guess he'd be in pole position tonight. I want to contrast also just how tight this race is. I mean, we could be heading to recount territory with, for example, what happened in the governor's race, where in the governor's race tonight, Mastriano basically sweeps except for coal country. This is a decisive win. And in the Democratic side, where some folks thought there'd be a competitive race between Connor Lamb and John Fetterman, Fetterman sweeps the state.
What happened to Connor Lamb?
You know, this is one of the fascinating
They
stories.
thought he was,
he was sort of the anointed one, a centrist candidate, tailor-made to win a general election in a swing state. People thought Fetterman, big personality, lieutenant governor, just took all the momentum. Not a lot of enthusiasm behind Connor Lamb tonight. Fetterman winning this from a hospital bed.
Right. And Kenyatta did well in Philadelphia? Or?
Philadelphia. I mean, that's what you got to look at. It's still, though, Fetterman territory, but he got 53,000 votes there. So really the story tonight, the thing to watch, the thing the country and possibly control of the Senate holding on to is this Senate race.
Let's go back to this, because there's 1,020.
Yeah,
now.
so we just saw, while we were on air, you see that number getting tighter.
So Mehmet Oz, in that speech when he's addressing the folks at his campaign headquarters, saying we can still pull this off, this isn't going to be decided until tomorrow.
At least.
He's right.
1,000 votes right now, 0.1%.
Is that a runoff?
0.5% or less is a runoff. Is a recount.
Right.
There is no runoff.
That's what I meant, recount.
But recount. So we're very much in recount territory right now. This is going to go on for days, plural, potentially. This is as tight as it gets.
Wow. So you can see it's still coming in. It's razor thin, right?
Yeah.
And it could happen now, but we shall see at least within the next couple of hours. CNN is ready to project the Republican primary for governor. Brad Little, who's the incumbent, is projected to win over Janice McGee in the lieutenant governor's race there. The lieutenant governor, I should say. So I want to bring in now Harry Enton and Ron Brownstein to talk about that. Hello to you, both of you. So what is happening here? We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Let's talk about, hi, Harry. Let's talk about the Senate race here. It is an unbelievably tight race. What do you know?
I mean, I'll take it from here. And I would say this, essentially, and that is that this race is going to take a while to count. But, Jeff got at something, which is there's a real difference that we have seen between the early vote and then the election day vote. If, in fact, there is still some absentee ballots to be counted, what you saw earlier on in the evening was essentially that Oz was trailing in that race. He caught up as we went on. So McCormick was doing better in that early vote. If there's still a lot of that vote left, yes, we're seeing some squeezing right now. Yes, it is too close to call. But the fact is, Dave McCormick has led at every single point in this evening. You'd rather be him than Mehmet Oz. But again, there's a reason why we haven't called. This thing is tight as a tick. Yeah. It's ridiculously close.
Boy,
Ron Brownstein,
everybody channeling their inner Dan Rather, tight as a tick tonight. Look, what really struck me about this race was even after Donald Trump called McCormick a liberal Wall Street Republican, What was McCormick's response? He didn't criticize Trump. He wrapped himself around Trump. He went on Breitbart Radio yesterday and said Donald Trump did what no Republican had done before. He crafted an agenda to deal with the problems of forgotten Americans, and I will go to Washington and implement that agenda. You know, and his behavior really kind of underscores the point. We talked about this earlier this week, Don. I mean, to me, the issue tonight is not so much who Donald Trump endorsed and what happened to them. It's who endorsed Donald Trump. I mean, all of the major candidates are positioning themselves in this race as officials who will keep the Republican Party moving in the Trump direction. And I think that is the overwhelming story of the night. There are gradations, obviously, and who he personally endorses matters to some extent. But the real message, as in Ohio, is that there simply is not a big constituency anymore in the Republican electorate for an alternative direction. And that has enormous implications, both for the competition between the parties, but also for the very structure of American democracy, as we're going to see highlighted, I think, by this governor's race in Pennsylvania as clearly as any, with an election denier who wants to make it much harder to vote in Pennsylvania as the Republican nominee, and someone who might, in fact, be a genuine threat not to certify even a clear Democratic win in 2 years.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll get back to you. Please stand by. Here with me now, political commentators Charlie Dent, Bakari Sellers, Alice Stewart, along with CNN senior political analyst, Mr. Mark Preston. Okay, let's just slow it down a bit because we had a lot going on in the beginning. The race tightened up in Pennsylvania. And then I just want to make sure that that projection that we had, the key race alert, so to speak. Projection, Idaho Republican primary for Governor Brad Little, the incumbent, is projected to win over Janice McGee, and she's the lieutenant governor. So now I want to bring in these guys to discuss everything that is happening. You've got Pennsylvania now, which is where you're from, less than 1,000 votes, or about 1,000 votes that separate McCormick and Dr. Oz. What the heck is going on there?
Well, we knew this was going to be a tight race between Oz and McCormick, and certainly Barnett was surging, but they tamped her down pretty well over the last few days. So I'm not at all surprised by this. It's interesting that none of the candidates who ran for the Senate, there were 7 Republican candidates, I believe, for Senate in Pennsylvania, not one has ever held elected office. And the 2 leaders, Oz and McCormick, haven't lived in the state for a very long time.
It's down to 920 votes. Can we get the tallies up in the big wall here so that we can see them on set? Thank you very much. Down to 900 and about 20 votes here.
It's too close to call. You're not going to know enough. Some of these counties aren't going to get into some of these mail-in votes until tomorrow. And some, I think, Cumberland County and a few others. But bottom line is, we knew this was going to be a tight race. And it just seems to me that McCormick has performed well. I mean, they all embrace Trump. But if you ask my opinion, I would tell you that I think McCormick is a much stronger general election candidate than Oz against Fetterman. And I think he would actually beat Fetterman against Oz. I think it's a more competitive race. But I think McCormick has a good profile, particularly for the suburban areas of Pennsylvania for a general election.
And Charlie hits on the important takeaway of the night is the Republican Party needs to look at nominating candidates that will win the general election as opposed to just the primary. We need to elect candidates that are reflective of the Republican Party, not Trump's wing of the Republican Party.
You think McCormick can win the general election?
Absolutely. Against Fetterman, he certainly can. He's certainly a lot more moderate than Oz and Barnett as well. And look, this is obviously close, but in speaking with the McCormick's campaign tonight, they're looking at the absentee ballots, the ones that are still out, are in places where he is favored to win a majority of those votes. They're very optimistic. Obviously, Oz is as well. But without a doubt, we're going to probably have a recount in a lot of these these votes because it's going to be so close. And we're going to find out that Barnett has come from the sleeper candidate of this race to the spoiler candidate for Oz, because she has been just zapping votes from him.
The unique thing about this, though, and what many people and my good friends on the Republican Party don't want to acknowledge, is that there's nothing real about Dave McCormick, a hedge fund guy who all of a sudden becomes a Tea Party guy, who all of a sudden becomes a MAGA guy, who yesterday was on Breitbart Radio. That is not who Dave McCormick is. And so he's going to waffle and wharf.
So what are you saying here?
I'm saying that it's going to be very difficult for somebody who is not true to themselves to be able to go throughout the different portions of Pennsylvania. And I will admit, Charlie knows this way better than I do. and win this race. I mean, you have to have somebody who is at least honest to themselves. And Dave McCormick has become so many different things. The thing about Fetterman and the unique part about Fetterman and the Democratic Party is simply this. The Democratic Party, you saw Malcolm Kenyatta tonight, who ran an amazing race, even though he got 10% of the vote. You know, Malcolm Kenyatta is a very, very young candidate. He's an awe-inspiring candidate, gay black man who ran extremely strong in Philadelphia. What's happening is the Democratic Party is already consolidated around Fetterman. I mean, we're going to go out there and do whatever we can around Fetterman. This race is going to boil down to whether or not black folk can come out and vote in Philadelphia and the surrounding areas, and I believe they will. The difference, though, is Fetterman can do something that other candidates in Pennsylvania have not been able to do, which is that Fetterman can speak to rural white voters. He simply can. And I think that Dave McCormick's going to have a problem because a hedge fund guy who all of a sudden is a common man, that's a hard sell, regardless of what people around the table say.
Isn't it the... Wait, hang on. Go on.
I was going to say, look, I think Fetterman's problem against McCormick will be the collar counties of Philadelphia and the Lehigh Valley. You know, Fetterman is kind of, let's face it, he's an unconventional guy.
That's an understatement.
I'm being very kind. But he's in those upscale counties around Philadelphia, Republicans need to perform. You know, I think McCormick has a very good profile for that area, and he is going to return to his bio. He was born in Pittsburgh. They lived in Bloomsburg. They have a tree farm.
My only point is, like,
and
you just said the key word.
Yeah.
He's going to return to his bio. Yesterday he was MAGA. Tomorrow he's going to return to his bio. Like, look, exactly. I mean, it's cute. I appreciate it, but I mean, this dude is a butterfly.
Isn't that the issue, though? It's the same issue with Mehmet Oz as with McCormick, right? People,
Yeah,
the lack of authenticity, right? And that's why.
That's why Fetterman has an advantage, because Fetterman is who Fetterman is. These guys are something special every day.
But he's a Bernie Sanders guy, too.
He is, right. Look, Fetterman is who he is. I actually think that that the profile that he cuts is very interesting and is going to make him extremely competitive in this state, in this race where, to Charlie's point, that the Republicans should win. I mean, the Republicans should win it. I mean, the fact that that the candidate right now, McCormick, is MAGA, but yet is really Republican establishment. The likes of the Senate, of Mitch McConnell, of all this, inside D.C. money is all going to go to McCormick anyway, because they're going to be supportive of him, because they know deep down inside that he is more like him. And Donald Trump, let's not rule out the fact that Donald Trump is going to come out in the next couple of days, assuming that McCormick wins, and says, I love this guy. Dina Powell was such a great member, of my staff. And I'm behind him.
Listen, I want to get to the break here, but he doesn't believe in the election lie, or he has not run on the election lie, right? And other parts of MAGA, he did not embrace Donald Trump at all.
Makes him more acceptable for more centrist Republicans like Charlie.
And he also had the American First agenda was more of his platform. And I love you, Bakari, but you've talked about Fetterman a lot. You haven't said really what he is. He's a progressive wing of the Democrat Party. His views are very progressive. I just don't see how that's going to play overall in the state of Pennsylvania.
I need to get back to John Avalon over at the Magic Wall. Dr. Oz has taken the lead in the Pennsylvania race. John, what's going on?
I don't know why we're talking about McCormick.
So take a look what's going on here. I mean, Oz, for the first time tonight, pulling ahead. Now, let's be real. This is 714 vote, folks.
John, a lead is a lead.
And it is a momentum shift. As Harry Anton was saying earlier tonight, you want to be where Dave McCormick's been all night, up until this point. So this could be a tipping point for the race. Again, we got 90% in now, still 10% out. Lancaster, major X factor with the outstanding votes.
Lancaster.
But take a look at this. I mean, Oz getting the momentum he was telling his team he would see. Finally pulling ahead out of a long night. So nobody should be breathing easy in either camp, but at least a little bit of Big Mo heading towards Dr. Oz.
31.2%, 31.2%. As a local anchor and reporter in Pennsylvania, Charlie, that was one of the first things they told me. It's Lancaster, not Lancaster, right?
Lancaster County, and I'm happy to speak Pennsylvania Dutch to you too, Donnie Lemon. I know how to do that.
We've got a long way to go.
Throw you down the stairs.
We're just getting started. Thank you very much.
Charlie did.
We're going to take a quick break here, but we've got lots more election results to come in tonight, including the governor's race in Pennsylvania and how it can impact the 2024 election, and Madison Cawthorn conceding. Stay with us. Look, we always say that it's a nail-biter of a race, but it really is playing out in Pennsylvania right now in the GOP Senate race there. Look at that. Dr. Mehmet Oz has taken the lead for the first time, but it's still neck and neck, 31.2% to 31.2%. Mehmet Oz is 714 votes ahead right now. It doesn't get much closer than that. So here with me now, CNN political commentators Charlie Dent, Bakari Sellers, Alice Stewart, along with CNN's senior political analyst, Mr. Mark Preston. So, Charlie, let's talk about Pennsylvania has this important, we're going to get back to the Senate race. They've got this important governor's race, as well as Democrat and Attorney General Josh Shapiro is going to face off with, right, Doug Mastriano there. What do you think is going, how do you think he's going to shape up against Mastriano and Shapiro? What do you think that race is going to be?
Well, I think that, Josh Shapiro was probably the happiest guy in Pennsylvania tonight.
Why is that?
He got exactly what he wanted. He invaded the Republican primary by running ads that were very statements about, he's the most pro-Trump guy in the race, and basically building up Mastriano for Republican voters. And Mastriano, many believe, he is unelectable. And I suspect, I used to serve in the state Senate, and I don't think that Mastriano could beat Shapiro in the Senate Republican caucus in Harrisburg.
Okay, so look, I think everyone learned after 2016, don't count anyone out, right?
Yep.
And I hear people saying that all the time. Why are you saying that? Because, look, he ran away with it.
The collar counties of Philadelphia and the Lehigh Valley. 35% of the vote is probably going to come out of those 5 counties in Philadelphia, plus the 4 collar counties. You extend that up to the Lehigh Valley. That's a lot of votes. And it's a more moderate area of the state. And I think this stolen election business is going to turn off a lot of swing voting Republicans and independents. And he's really going to have to make a lot of votes up in other parts of the state. Shapiro hasn't had to run hard left. He didn't have a primary. And Josh is a pretty popular attorney general, let's face it. And so I think that he's well positioned. Now, can Mastriano make a race of it? Perhaps, because it could be a very good Republican year. I just don't know how he gets over the top.
So listen, Mark, Trump endorsed Doug Mastriano. He's been a fierce proponent of the big lie for election fraud in 2020. And I just want to remind everyone that the Pennsylvania governor appoints the Secretary of State who oversees elections. I mean, this new matchup just became even more important.
I mean, I hate to say that what happened on January 6th and, the months leading up to it is the new normal, but it is the new normal. I mean, earlier this evening, Jake Tapper said, my gosh, I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. And I can tell you, I don't think we've ever seen anything like this in politics, what we've seen over the past few years. Look, Mastriano is going to play to a certain element of the MAGA base. But to Charlie's point, especially in a state like Pennsylvania, he's not going to have that opportunity. At least on paper right now, there's not a chance that he's going to have the opportunity to do it. But you do have to ask yourself, though, what were the Republican voters thinking when they decided to make him their nominee?
Interesting. Okay, listen, we said we're going to get to North Carolina. We're going to do that, but we got to get back to John Avlon first because, John, things just tightened up even more in the Pennsylvania Senate race. What do you have for us? Dr. Mehmet Oz.
Right. So we'd seen that Mehmet Oz was just around 700 votes up. Now that's shrunk 200. It shows just how much this is a game of inches. Every ballot counting, and with 91%, who knows which way this is going to go? But Oz has had the big mo, pulling back a little bit. McCormick still very much. I mean, look, they are tied 31.2 to 31.2. So the reason Oz jumped ahead just a little bit seems to be a lot of ballots in Bucks County. And that seems to be which is where his headquarters is and where his wife's family is from. So him getting the edge there made the difference. But every vote is counting right now. And this is just a stunning race to watch. So now 502 ahead in the last minutes, changing from 700 to 500.
I think this just made our night a little bit longer. Bakari and I are looking at each other like it's going to be he's ahead. 400, 300. 400, 200. He's at the 10-yard line, the 7, the 1. Oh, boy, here we go. And guess what? Madison Cawthorn right after the break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, everyone. A lot going on. I want to bring in now Harry Enton and Ron Brownstein, and we're going to talk about Madison Cawthorn. Gentlemen, hello to you once again. Hey. So, Ron, Madison Cawthorn lost. Trump appeal for a second chance for him. To lose this race, I mean, doesn't normally happen to an incumbent in a safe seat. With all the scandals and the political blunders, you know, he really got in his own way. He lost this race.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, he got in his own way. I mean, Trump's endorsement is a powerful force in Republican primaries, but it's not a complete get-out-of-jail-free card, right? I mean, no president has that capacity. We're going to see Biden tested in Oregon tonight. You know, the most famous example, Franklin Roosevelt in 1938 tried to purge the Democratic Party of the Southern senators who opposed him. All of them lost. So no one has the ability to, you know, simply command all voters. And Cawthorn, I think, just, you know, he put more on the camel's back than it could bear, and the voters there were just kind of tired of the antics, and I think that was it was a personal repudiation more than any kind of shift in direction in terms of the party.
Well, when I said he lost this race, I mean he lost it more than the other guy won the race, right? He was really his own opponent there. Harry, what do you think this reveals about Donald Trump's hold on the GOP?
Look, Donald Trump still has a hold on the GOP, right? You look at the North Carolina Senate race, Ted Budd easily won there. He was, of course, Trump endorsed and basically went from 9% in the polls before Trump endorsed him up to 55%. But I think, you know, I would say this, which is the Trump endorsement can only go so far. You saw last week Charles Herbster in Nebraska, the gubernatorial race there, had sexual harassment allegations, numerous ones of them against him. You go here, again, you have multiple scandals going on with Madison Cawthorn. And, you know, to get to the point you asked earlier on, Don, you know, just how rare this is. Only 2% of incumbents who ran for re-election in 2020 lost in a primary, just 2%. So clearly Madison Cawthorn did something very, very, very wrong. And the fact is, all of this garbage, this personal stuff, they're going to accept Trump. They'll accept basically anything on Trump. But when you add in the personal stuff, the orgy talk, all this garbage that just kept coming and coming and coming, Republican voters said, you know what? Let's go with Chuck Edwards. He was endorsed by Tom Tillis. He was endorsed by the head of the North Carolina Senate on the Republican side and in the House, lower house there. So the fact is, Cawthorn lost, but I don't think this says anything larger about Trump, except perhaps maybe, you know what, he should be more careful with his endorsements because he endorsed a loser in this case.
Well, I'm going to bring some of the other folks here who are in the room with me in, because we were having this conversation, guys, before we got to you, actually in the break. This is not the end of Madison Cawthorn, is it, of his political career?
No, but no. I mean, listen. I mean, Madison Cawthorn will be a political commentator at CNN. I mean, at Fox News. Excuse me. I mean, he'll do that. Pray to God. I mean, just can we rewind the tape? That was a slip. It's late. Yeah, I know. It's late. Left side or your right side? It's late. I mean, he's going to replace Charlie Denton, but he'll be welcome to our new president. No, so he's going to be a new political commentator at Fox News. I mean, he's going to have. I mean, it's Charlie Kirk, it's Ben Shapiro, it's Matt Gaetz. It's Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's this new wing of the party that he speaks for.
Charlie said, "No way, it's never going to."
Well, I mean, Charlie's here with me now. I mean, this is where we are. But let me just say this: the number one rule of Fight Club is that you don't talk about Fight Club, and Madison Cawthorn broke all of those rules, and it was very obvious from the beginning that the Republican Party was out to get him. And all I say is that you saw what happened with Madison Cawthorn. The Trump endorsement only goes but so far.
Well, there are many rational Republicans across this country that are saying, thank goodness that this was the way this race ended. And thank goodness for Tom Tillis for putting the money and the message behind getting rid of someone that really is a black eye on the Republican Party. To Bakari's point, he not only went after his colleagues in the House by saying they had orgies and doing drugs. He also turned on the voters in his district, certainly by doing embarrassing things, saying a lot of outlandish things, but district shopping. He was running in the 11th and in the 13th, back in the 11th. He really turned his back on the people of his district. Look, he needs to go away. I think he'll probably get some television gig. I think he's young. I think he's certainly has a lot of growing up to do. We have not seen the last of Madison Cawthorn, but hopefully we've seen the end right now of the damage he can do in the House right now, and it's time to get in some new blood. And I think Edwards is a good person to do that.
Ron, I just want to ask you before I get to the Democrats on the other side here. I mean, Madison Cawthorn has obviously gone through a lot, right? It's having that accident when he was 18 years old. I mean, he probably needs more than just to go away and get out of politics. He has issues that he needs to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, we're watching someone, you know, kind of deal with their own personal demons in the modern media environment and political polarization. I mean, it's kind of frightening and horrifying to watch, as well as, you know, all the points that the Bakari was making about how he's kind of immediately inserted himself in kind of the celebrity, conservative, provocateur wing of the Republican Party. Like, beneath all of that is an actual person who is obviously, you know, having some serious issues that are playing out under the brightest spotlight imaginable.
Yeah. Gentlemen, stand by. Stand by, folks, here in the studio with me as well. We're going to talk about the Democrats on the other side and so much more. Don't forget, Pennsylvania Senate race, GOP Senate race, Dr. Oz, Dave McCormick. I mean, wow, 637 votes right now separate the two men. We got a long night ahead of us. Back now with CNN's continuing election coverage. CNN projecting Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman has won Pennsylvania's GOP Senate primary. Back with me now, Charlie Dent, Bakari Sellers, Alice Stewart, and Mark Preston. I said we were going to talk about the Democrats. Bakari Sellers, here's your chance. What do you see? Fetterman winning from a hospital bed.
Fetterman won from the beginning. I mean, Conor Lamb ran a campaign which was it left a lot of questions from when he got into the race to what he was actually doing in the race. And Conor Lamb couldn't even tell you why he was running today. He's a great candidate, right? I mean, I think that we saw the fact that he won that Trump seat. He's a great candidate, can be, but he never really carved his way or his lane. I think he thought that he was supposed to be ordained.
Yeah, wasn't he the chosen one?
He thought he was. You know, Malcolm Kenyatta ran a great race, and I said it off air, and I'll say it, and I can't wait for my phone to blow up. I mean, the Republicans are going to try to paint Fetterman out to be Bernie Sanders. That ain't going to work. Fetterman's a great candidate for rural, white, Democratic voters, those voters who have left the Democratic Party. I mean, we have this obsession with those diner voters. You know, we do all of those kind of one-offs where you go to a diner and find those people who voted for Barack Obama and then voted for Donald Trump. Fetterman's going to get those people. The question is, can you pull a gun out on a black kid and still get votes in Philadelphia as what is a stain on Fetterman's record? He is going to have to figure out, and he has not proven himself to be someone who necessarily listens to this, but he is going to have to ingratiate himself and spend time in communities in and around black communities in Pittsburgh, but definitely in Philadelphia, and figure out why what he did. He can't even apologize. There is a scene in the debate, and don't ask me why I'm watching debates between Pennsylvania Democratic primary candidates, but Malcolm Kenyatta asked Fetterman to simply apologize for what he did, and Fetterman couldn't do it. Like, that's not going to fly.
I watched the primaries in Pennsylvania. Because I used to live there, but I watched the debates, I should say.
Yeah, the debates. Yeah, and I think that Fetterman's going to have as we say, come to Jesus. And he's going to have to spend time in the AME churches and the black churches and the HBCUs and be able to regardless of whether or not they're going to be able to paint him as Bernie Sanders, his biggest problem is whether or not black folk are going to trust him. There is time, but right now he has to be willing to do the work.
Well, you live there now. I used to. You live there now. Is this what he'd say, John?
Look, I think that John Fetterman's going to get crushed in these rural areas. It's a question by how much. Can he keep the margins down a little bit? I mean, he's going to get destroyed there. I mean, I know he's spending time out there, but it's not going to get him a lot of votes.
What if it's Mehmet Oz?
What's that?
What if in the end, I mean, we're talking about how McCormick is.
Well, look,
what's that now? No, I said I forgot about Oz, but I mean.
Well, look, I think that, Oz is kind of a wild card. I mean, if I'm a Democrat, what I'll do to Oz is I'll hit him on the carpetbagger issue. Where you been for 30 years, or your whole life for that matter? That's going to be a.
But I mean, I hear you. But I think McCormick is again, the only way I can describe him is a butterfly. He morphs into different things depending upon the season. But Oz actually has been in our television screens for a very long period of time. I mean, you talk about from whether or not it's Oprah to The Breakfast Club and Charlemagne the God. I mean, Oz is someone who has been there. Now,
recognition.
But I mean, to Alice's point, and this is probably going to drive Alice crazy, I think he was pro-choice yesterday. I don't know what he is today. But I mean, that's the problem with McCormick and Oz. The problem with the Republican Party and Donald Trump is that you end up with these candidates who don't stand for anything.
Okay. Well, hold that thought. On the other side of the break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We're back now, keeping an eye on all the races here. Joining me now, Charlie Dent, Bakari Sellers, Alice Stewart, and Mark Preston. So, as you were talking about Fetterman versus McCormick, or possibly Dr. Mehmet Oz, who is, by the way, in the lead right now, 637 votes in the Pennsylvania Senate Republican primary.
I think before the break, my friend Bakari talked about Fetterman and how he would be a good fit for Pennsylvania. He's got a few things to answer for. First of all, he is a progressive Democrat. He has supported universal health care. He supported the wealth tax, $15 minimum wage, legalizing pot. He is a very progressive candidate. I don't see that fitting people of Pennsylvania. It's a purple state, but it is not that blue. He also needs to answer to the incident that Bakari referred to, racially profiling an African-American young man and not apologizing for it, not owning up to it. He's going to have to explain that, because that is going to be the first ad out of the Republican Party is going after him on that issue. And another thing, I pray he's doing well in the hospital. He does need to explain exactly what happened in the timeline and have doctors come out and explain, you know, here's his condition, here's how he's doing. So he has a lot of things that he needs to explain to the people of Pennsylvania if he's going to make headway.
The health issue helped or hurt him?
The health issue?
Yeah.
Well, he was up by like 40 points, like in the polling going into it. I mean,
I'd take that. Well, not the
yeah, I mean, I would take a couple days off in the hospital and go into Election Day with a 40-point lead, which he did. You know, I guess my question with Fetterman is, and I did say this to Bakari off air, but I'll say it now, is what happens to the African-American community? They're not going to back Mehmet Oz, or maybe they will. They're not going to back McCormick. I mean, aren't they traditionally going to stay with, with Fetterman?
That's not enough, though. And so what has to happen is the community has to, and let me just also say this, I don't speak for all black folk. I mean, I just don't. A lot of times when you get on these platforms, they're like, that black guy speaks for everybody. I do not. But what I can tell you, though, is that African-American voters have to come out in bunches, in large amounts, in that Philadelphia and 5-county area for Fetterman to have a chance to win. And your point, listen, the progressive bona fides that you named, like legalizing marijuana, raising the minimum wage, universal health care, that ain't gonna scare nobody. I mean, actually, if that's progressive, then put that title on me. I would wear it. But the fact that he does have some issues in his past that he has refused and been too stubborn to acknowledge and apologize for, particularly the incident with the young black man. And yeah, I'm not beating a dead horse. This was an issue in the primary that he needs to say something about. That is an impediment to, and I think Dr. Oz cuts into that more than the social butterfly who calls himself.
Dr. Oz has name recognition, African-American.
He has name recognition and he has validators. I mean, look, I didn't expect to name drop Oprah, but he has validators. I mean, he has Oprah, he has Charlamagne. I mean, and by no means do they speak for the African-American community, but he will have the ability to cut into a base that Fetterman needs.
You think Dr. Mehmet Oz will have to cut into the base because of Oprah and Charlamagne? Oprah just is not supporting Dr.
Or dampen the turnout.
But Oprah doesn't support Dr. Oz.
That doesn't matter. My point is that is the relationship that people understand him and know him from. That's my only point.
Okay, all right. They are counting the votes in that Senate race in Pennsylvania is getting tighter and tighter. The latest results, that's next. You know what that music means. It is election night in America, and we're following all the breaking news results coming in from big primary races in 5 states. One of the hottest races, the nail-biter, Pennsylvania. Look at your screen. Former hedge fund CEO Dave McCormick neck and neck with Trump-endorsed TV doc Dr. Mehmet Oz. And the race is getting tighter by the minute. Straight now to CNN's John Avalon with me over here at the Magic Wall. I should say I'm joining him at the Magic Wall. Pennsylvania. Hey.
Look, this is just stunning,
Crazy.
right? I mean, Mehmet Oz now 851 up. He took the lead for the first time tonight around a half hour ago.
Okay.
And the big dynamic here is Kathy Barnett had been eating into what might have been a clear win for him. Dave McCormick coming up the middle as the more moderate, traditional Republican candidate, i.e. not election denying. Look, this thing is still tight. It's a 0.1% race. But as these counties, particularly Bucks County and around the Philadelphia suburbs, they're coming in with a slight edge to Oz right now. But this thing is well within recount territory. This isn't going away anytime.
Why is there a slight edge? What do you think is happening? That there's a slight.
I think Trump's endorsement is making a difference. McCormick, I think, did well with early votes. You see, Oz doing really well in coal country.
Right.
It's something to really pay attention to. McCormick's strength is the suburbs in Pittsburgh, where he grew up. But right now, you see Oz just edging ahead. But this isn't going to be over. This is going to be days. This isn't recount territory. Every ballot counts right now. 851.
Did you say days?
Possibly.
We thought hours, maybe.
I mean,
maybe
look,
tomorrow.
hours, maybe days. Look, you do not get tighter than this. 851 votes.
All right, to Idaho and Oregon now. Where do you want to go first?
Well, let's take a trip over to our friends in Idaho. Now, here's what's important to take a look at. The Republican governor here is Brad Little. He's a conservative guy. He backed the lawsuits to try to overturn the election for Donald Trump. Not conservative enough for Donald Trump. Backing instead his own lieutenant governor. I mean, this is a fratricidal race here. And what you see, though, is that Trump endorsement not helping the lieutenant governor begin. Incumbent Brad Little seeming to run away with it so far. Now 45% in, but even in the most conservative north part of the state, incumbent Governor Brad Little in pole position.
I butchered her name earlier. I saw it in the prompter. I'm like, wait a minute. I know it's pronounced McGeehan, but when you see it, it's like McGeechan, right?
Yeah, but that's an important thing. Look, I mean, Donald Trump's endorsement doesn't always take you over the top, even in a Republican primary.
All right.
I want to bring one other thing just back to folks' attention because it's really interesting. North Carolina, right? This is something where Donald Trump endorsed Ted Budd. This guy had no support in the state convention. Trump endorses him. He is walking away with this thing. What's so extraordinary, see Pat McCrory there, 24%? One county, Mecklenburg, Charlotte. This is where he was mayor. This is a two-term governor. And Donald Trump's endorsement pushed Budd way into pole position, and a guy who ran the state, conservative governor, former mayor, can only pull one county in the entire state. That's extraordinary.
Yeah, that is extraordinary. Thank you, sir. We'll get back to you. Yeah. Wait a minute, Pennsylvania? I'm just kidding. We're keeping an eye on Pennsylvania. Let's get to Harry Enton and Ron Brownstein. Bring these folks into the room, into the conversation. Hello once again. So, Ron, you see the suburban vote is shrinking tonight, right? Shrinking. Yeah. Tell me about that. What's up with it?
Yeah, I think you see in these results how the Trump direction for the party is self-perpetuating because the kind of voters who are the most resistant to it are becoming less likely to participate in Republican primaries, leaving what's there, the core that remains, more Trumpy than before. You know, Charlie was mentioning before that the Southeast Pennsylvania, the Philadelphia and the four surrounding counties are about 30% of the population. Back in the 90s, they cast a third of the Republican primary vote. Well, I did a quick back of the envelope here tonight. It's only about 1/5 of the Republican primary vote was cast in Philadelphia and the four suburban counties tonight, which reflects the movement of those counties toward the Democrats. We saw in Ohio a few weeks ago, the share of the vote cast in Franklin, Cuyahoga, and Hamilton counties, the three biggest counties in the state, was significantly lower than it was 15 years ago in the Republican primary. In North Carolina tonight, Wake and Mecklenburg, whose inner suburbs were where Republicans were born in the South, cast only about 1/5 of the vote in the Republican primaries. Again, back of the envelope calculation. And what that means is that all of these candidates are competing more for non-urban, increasingly non-college, culturally conservative voters, and that has a magnetic pull on the entire Republican field, where you see even someone like McCormick, who in the past might have been the establishment Republican candidate, saying on Breitbart Radio yesterday that he is going to go be a warrior for the Donald Trump agenda in Washington, even after Trump had criticized him. I mean, the real story here is how the whole center of gravity in the Republican Party continues to be pulled in a Trumpian direction, whether or not his personal choices are winning.
I want to go to Harry Enton. Harry, I would have a question for you, but you are, as my mom would say, sitting there looking wise and otherwise. What is on your mind?
I'm just looking at two great-looking gentlemen at 1:05 in the morning here in the East. Look, what's on my mind is pretty simple, which is that a suburban vote is worth as much as an urban vote, which is worth as much as a rural vote. And yes, it's true. Look, Republicans are struggling in suburban areas versus where they were, say, 20, 30 years ago. But if you look at the turnout in Pennsylvania, for example, Republican turnout relative to 2018 is up compared to where the Democrats were. That is, Republicans are turning out more in Pennsylvania. We saw the same thing in Ohio. We saw the same thing in Nebraska. We're seeing the same thing in North Carolina. you just keep projecting it forward. And what I'm essentially saying is that Republicans are trading votes, and at this particular point, the votes that they are trading in seem to be getting enough votes in other areas. So as we project forward towards the fall, while primary turnout doesn't necessarily foretell what will happen in a general election, I would be very happy if I were the Republicans at this point and seeing how many of our voters are coming out and voting in these primaries versus the Democrats, who are clearly struggling versus 2018.
What? I see some.
No, I mean,
you got a yes and a no here. Charlie's going yes. You're going.
No,
I'd like to hear the
respectfully,
panel.
I mean,
Go ahead.
Harry and Ron probably have higher SAT scores, and actually not
I
probably.
didn't take
they
the
do.
SAT.
But he didn't even have to take it. He was waved in. But I think what they're saying is offset by the practicality and the reality of the fact that candidates win elections, right? And what you're seeing in this progression of primary season is a lot like when you had Todd Aiken and the young lady who said that she wasn't a witch. Can't remember her name.
Christine O'Donnell.
Christine O'Donnell.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I get it. I understand where the trends are. But when you have a Herschel Walker on the ticket, when you have a conversation between McCormick and Mehmet Oz, when you're talking about Ted Budd, when you're talking about even Charlie Dent will tell you, I believe, that Mehmet Oz and McCormick are not the strongest general election candidates who ran for the United States Senate tonight. Ted Budd is not a stronger candidate than Pat McCrory. The fact is that you have 1,000 Republicans who are better candidates than Herschel Walker. Okay. But this is the Trump impact. And so whatever the trends are.
Let Charlie in and then
Look, but what Harry just said, though, I agree with.
Do you agree with me, too, though?
Well, let me get to Harry first. Harry is right. Look, Republican anger and energy is high. It's the midterm dynamic. And what you're seeing is Republican enthusiasm is higher than the Democrats. Just the Democrats who were in 2018. You don't need to be a statistician to figure this out. It's a midterm. Democrats are on their heels. And nothing surprising. Now, you're right. I mean, I think you could make a case that there could have been stronger candidates on the Republican side, but you don't have to be the strongest candidate to win when the wind is at your back for the Republicans.
Yes.
Right, that's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Well,
go.
Here, I'm just going to take it. I'm going to take it right here and say, look, there's a difference between federal elections that Ted Budd's running in and whoever the Republican nominee, which we'll find out sometime in the next 45 years who that'll be, versus if you're running in the Pennsylvania gubernatorial race and you're Mastriano, right? There's a real example of that in 2014 where Tom Wolf, the current governor, came in a very red year and was able to take that seat because the incumbent governor was so unpopular. So I think Mastriano is a disaster. I think Josh Shapiro is lighting the fireworks. He's very happy. But in the Senate race, let's see what happens.
Good, Ron.
Yeah, there are a couple of separate issues, right? I mean, the first issue that I was trying to raise is that the balance of power inside the Republican Party is clearly changing as a result of the way Trump has changed the coalition. And by alienating the voters who are most resistant to it, he's creating a Republican primary electorate that is going to produce more Trumpy candidates as a general proposition. As some of them are going to be weaker candidates. And as Harry and Charlie says, that may not matter much. 75% of Americans are saying we're on the wrong track. 65% are saying that they are losing ground because of inflation. And in that kind of headwind, a lot of candidates who would lose in a more neutral environment are going to get over the top. But eventually you will get back to a more neutral environment. And the question will be, I think, in that kind of landscape, whether the consistent tilt now in Republican primaries for candidates who are very Trumpy, who are denying the election, who are running on banning abortion without exceptions for rape and incest at 6 weeks, whether you can win when you don't have this giant tailwind at your back. And even in a year where there is a tailwind at your back, there will be candidates, as in 2010 and 2014, who are simply a bridge too far. Mastriano, maybe one. You could see them in Arizona and other states as well.
Okay, so let me just say that I pay attention, and I am listening to the lady to my left, Alice Stewart, who made this point earlier. And now the guys are making all the same points that Alice Stewart made earlier, except they went like this.
They said it with more authority, and they're certainly much more handsome than I am.
You said, I think what you said, I'm paraphrasing here, is that what Republicans need to do is nominate candidates or run candidates who can win in a general, right? Is that what you said?
Absolutely. We need to nominate people that are reflective of the Republican Party, not the Trump wing of the party. And look, Ron knows the crosstabs, suburban, urban, all these voters, and Harry knows Republican and Democrat. The CNN poll that came out last week showing that the enthusiasm amongst registered voters is 9 points higher for Republicans than the last poll and 6 points higher for Democrats. You know those numbers. But the key here is the independent, undecided voters, those in the middle. Those people are pissed off with the inflation, with the economy the way it is, with what's going on at the border, with what's going on with foreign policy, and with all of those aspects in the toilet. That is motivating these independent voters. And I think if I could put one button on the Ted Budd story, Donald Trump is going to claim victory for that. He does deserve a lot of credit for that. But also, the Club for Growth went in full speed ahead, going after McCrory, painting him as a liberal, which he is not. So there's also a lot of money going against these candidates, in addition to Trump. It's not just Trump in that specific case. Ted Budd benefited from Trump and Club for Growth going against his opponent.
Mark, he said, if you were, I think, who was it that Ron said, if I were, Ron or Harry, I forget, correct me, whoever it is. If I were a Republican tonight, I would be very happy about the enthusiasm and moving forward. We're going to talk about what happens next week in primaries, but would you be very happy about that?
Yeah, yes, but I do think we have to say this in the Republican Party that we knew when Charlie was in Congress, for the many years,
no more.
And the Republican Party that is now is no more. So while I do take to heart what Alice is saying, and there's a lot of Republicans that are saying that, the fact of the matter is that the Republican Party has now evolved, and it's now become a mixture of let's take Donald Trump out of it, because at some point he's not going to be here anymore. But Trumpism is still going to be here. And what is Trumpism? It's a whole lot of things. It's conservatism to the nth degree. It's this Christian nationalist agenda, that they're pushing. If you look at who Trump is surrounding himself with, and if you look at those who are trying to align themselves with, that is where the power base of the Republican Party, I think, is headed.
I'm getting way ahead of myself here, but I think that it's going to be interesting to see what happens if Trump actually does decide to run in 2024, because I'm not sure that he could stand another loss. He likes to be the kingmaker. And I think he has a better chance of being a kingmaker than being a king once again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't know. Charlie Dent, Ron?
Trump made a lot
of sense. Can I mention a name?
We got one. Go on.
I mean, we only mentioned the name one time, and John Avalon said it. And I know the Republicans are supposed to be jumping up and down and doing cartwheels and drinking Moet tonight, probably the rosé flavored kind. But the fact is, Sherry Beasley should be so excited tonight. Like, we're talking about all of this headwind and everything else, but I'm excited to actually give money to a candidate who can win a purple state. Sherry Beasley is the former Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court. She lost her last race by like 3 votes. I mean, it was an extremely close race for her reelection. She is a formidable candidate, and Ted Budd is as closest thing to Mastriano as you can get. So while we're talking about the fringes of the party, in this race in North Carolina, the fringe is you cannot paint Sherry Beasley out to be Bernie Sanders. You simply cannot. She's as close to center, a moderate Democrat as you can get. And what I'm saying is Ted Budd is the fringe. Ted Budd is everything that represents Trumpism and everything else. And so while you may be jumping for joy, what I'm saying is Democrats are excited, not only about Fetterman because we believe he has a chance, but I guarantee if you talk to a Democrat tonight who's in the know, who's funneling money, who wants to bundle money and bundle dollars, they're going to say the name Sherry Beasley over and over and over again.
I'm glad you butted your way in. That was a very good point, Bakari.
You gave me a compliment.
Even with the chicken wing sauce under your tie.
Hey.
Bakari.
I had calamari with a little, what's the dipping sauce called?
Take him out.
Little cocktail sauce. It was good.
Not siracha.
Marinara.
No. I tried to hide it.
All right. It's late,
now
y'all.
I'm self-conscious.
It's late, you can tell. Your tie is
late
hiding.
on the West Coast. People in LA are judging me right now. Let me
stand by, everyone. The
getting started
GOP
out
Senate
here.
race in Pennsylvania may be the hottest thing going this election night, but there is a race in Oregon tonight that is a big test for President Joe Biden. That's next. There you go. Key race alert for you. Dr. Mehmet Oz, his lead is increasing in Pennsylvania in that tight GOP Senate race there. Let's go to John Avalon at the Magic Wall. John, what's going on? How tight is it now?
I'll tell you right now, Dr. Oz up 1,127 votes, still statistically tied 31.2 to 31.2 with McCormick. Here's what's happening. Oz seems to be gaining in some of these counties, suburban Philadelphia, Bucks County in particular, where his headquarters is. So he's making some incremental gains. He's switched to momentum into the pole position, but really we're talking 1,000 votes here. Here's a major X factor to pay attention to, though. Lancaster County, okay? Right this, you see Kathy Barnett in first place, McCormick second. The key issue to watch here, and this is getting into the weeds, but this is what we're doing at this time of the hour, it's 7,000 outstanding votes that are going to have to be reprocessed. They are primarily mail-in votes. McCormick could have a real edge in that. So it's one more reason why this thing is far from over, and it could be not hours, but days, because we are well within recount territory. Now, I want to bring you to big attention to a Democratic race. Not a lot of them going on right now, but this House race in Oregon is really key. Take a look at this House race for District 5 in Oregon, okay? You say, why aren't we paying attention to this? That's because here you've got a centrist incumbent, Kurt Schrader, endorsed by the President of the United States. Right now, 40% in, he is being beaten handily by a progressive candidate, Jamie McLeod Skinner, who he outspent 6-1. This is partly the perils of redistricting. It's a more liberal district than it was when he'd been holding it in the past. And he's held this since 2009. But this is the president's prestige on the line. A lot of money coming in for Schrader. Right now, progressives in pole position in Oregon 5. So it's a reminder that the center is under attack in both parties right now. This is a cautionary sign for some Democrats.
John Avlon, you're amazing. How do you say that again? Lancaster?
Lancaster.
Thanks, John. Would you say Pennsylvania Dutch?
Yeah, throw Don Lemon down the stairs his shoes. He's a nice fella. That's what they'd say.
I tell you what, that Oregon race is an example of, if I was a Democrat running right now, I'd have alligator arms around Joe Biden. I would not want to be hugging onto him because of the way the economy is and all of the issues that are dragging down the ticket.
But it's Oregon. Like, that's not like indicative of the rest of the electoral field. That is one of the more liberal places in the entire union.
But not when it comes to pocketbook issues. People are still concerned when they're paying $5 a gallon of gas.
I don't disagree with you. Right. Like, I do think that inflation.
Yeah, but isn't that what she made about running the right Republican? This is running the right Democrat in Oregon, no?
Yep. I just don't think that this. You can't extrapolate, and Harry and Ron can probably, but you can't extrapolate a Schrader loss across the Democratic field. I don't think that's fair or accurate.
The Democrats are probably going to lose that seat. Kurt Schrader is a moderate Democrat. He's a veterinarian. That seat can easily go Republican. And I bet if this McLeod Skinner, if she is the nominee, Republicans are going to target that seat, and there's a good chance
Republicans won't win that seat, and I'll bet you whatever you want to.
It's a pretty competitive seat.
But they won't. I'll bet you whatever you want to.
Schrader reflected it pretty well.
I'll bet you. Republicans will not win that seat. This is not indicative. What you have is what you have in the Democratic Party is you have a changeover because people feel as if leadership. This is more of an outsider versus insider type of election than a referendum on where we are. Republicans aren't going to win this seat, and Jamie McLeod Skinner ran a great race.
But Mark Preston, let's talk about this since they're saying they're not going to win. Republicans not win.
We're diving deep into Oregon politics.
I know this is CNN polling shows 53% of Americans are burned out with politics right now. 23% marks that they are fired up. What kind of a political figure can break through in this climate? Someone's got to be able really to channel that, whatever that is.
Unfortunately, I don't think that you're going to have somebody, we're talking about running up the middle in these races. Someone's going to come and run up the middle and save the republic, as it stands right now. I think that, by the way, I'm surprised that it's only 53% of Americans that are really tired by politics, because when you think about politics, all you do right now is think about strife, anger, arguments. I don't know about anyone on the panel, but, when I go out socially, I kind of try to make a point of saying, I don't want to talk politics tonight, because it has really poisoned, the national conversation. But as I was saying before the break about the Republican Party not being the same, the Democratic Party is not the same as it was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and it's never going to go back as well. To the point of Fetterman's wife tonight on our own air saying, we'll embrace the progressive title if you want to talk about minimum wage at $15, if you want to talk about, health care for all in what have you. But what that's going to do, though, is it's going to squeeze out the likes of Connor Lamb and the centrist Democrat. And I know Bernard doesn't necessarily want to hear that,
I have to fundamentally disagree with you because I think the facts don't bear out what you're saying. You're saying it's not the same Democratic Party it was 5 years ago. And
it's not.
The facts don't bear that out. In 2008, who was the president of the United States? Barack Obama. Who was his vice president? Joe Biden. Who was the Speaker of the House? Nancy Pelosi. Who was the leader? We had The number 2 in charge was Chuck Schumer. We had Jim Clyburn. We had Steny Hoyer. These are still the same.
Who's driving the national conversation right now? Because I'll tell you right now, it's not Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. It is the more liberal wing of the party.
It's not true because
where AOC, where a two-term congressman, but who just gets elected and immediately is looked to as a soothsayer.
But that's fundamentally
what the
not true. I mean, if we're going to, that's not true because I can ask you right now who's driving the conversation, and if I were to say the person driving the conversation, even to my chagrin, is Joe Manchin. That is a fact.
Well,
Joe Manchin is driving the conversation along with Joe Biden. That is a fact. And Joe Manchin is anything but the center.
He's only driving the conversation, though, Bakari, because he has the power and the ability to stop what Democrats are trying to push through. Because there are other Democrats that don't agree with it.
I mean, Joe Manchin is driving the conversation.
There's a difference between driving the conversation and driving the politics. Joe Manchin may be driving the politics, but I don't think Joe Manchin is driving the conversation.
Yes.
I still think that. I honestly still think that Trump is driving the conversation. And not Joe Biden or Joe Manchin.
But what Trump has done, though, is because it forces us to talk, about Trump all the time because he takes all the oxygen out of the room. But the fact of the matter is that the Democratic Party has dramatically changed, since 2016. Yes, Barack Obama made history and what have you, but let's go back to Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and, go over all those issues and how Hillary Clinton.
But Mark, hold on. I don't think that's a polling. The polling doesn't show that the party has dramatically changed. The polling shows that the Republican Party has dramatically changed. The Republican Party has moved further to the right than Democrats have moved to the left.
Because the focus has been so much on the changing of the Republican
But as far as
Party
Donald Trump is driving the conversation, not because he takes the oxygen out of the room, it's just because all of these really far extremist candidates are somehow winning because of Donald Trump, not because he takes the oxygen out of the room. That's why I think he's driving the political conversation.
At the same time, you also have on the Democratic side, the far left wing of that party, the AOCs and the Squad, they are dominating the conversation. They are dictating a lot of what the platform is. The only difference with Joe Manchin is he's able to affect the politics in the Senate.
Is that right,
there's a difference between
it's not. I don't hear people talking about. I don't hear people talking about AOC. I hear conservatives.
But let's look
trying to make a thing of AOC.
Charlie, I'd like to just
look what's happening after this 2022 election. The Republican Party in Congress will become much more Trumpian, and the Democratic Party is going to become much more progressive because the Democrats who are going to lose are going to be people like Kurt Schrader in the general elections. The more moderate ones are going to be, many of them are going to be cleared out, and you're going to have a much more progressive.
This is the conversation.
It's going to happen.
I think Democrats are disappointed in the president, right, and the current president. This is what the polling shows for everybody. The majority of Americans are concerned or scared about the way things are going in the U.S. right now. And mainly that is on Joe Biden. He is the leader of the country.
I hate these polls in the way that they frame the questions because what we're doing here is what we should not do on TV, which is a both sides argument. And I will utterly and outwardly reject a both sides argument. These parties are not the same. They're not going in.
I just said the polling shows that Democrats have not. The Republicans have moved further to the right than Democrats.
I agree, but I hear you.
And Democrats mostly argue about policy. Republicans are arguing about crazy,
that is my point, because what we're not talking about here is the elephant in the room, which is Buffalo, New York. And we're not talking about the fact that you have a party, and for whatever you may say about the Democratic Party, we're talking about the way that we remedy inflation, the way that we deal with criminal justice reform. We're talking about voting rights. We're talking about abortion. What we're not doing, though, however, and we may talk about issues in the inappropriate way, but what we're not doing, though, is like Elise Stefanik, who's talking about the great replacement theory. What we're not talking about is a party who's running on xenophobia and bigotry and all of these other things. And so, look, while we're having this conversation, we do have to acknowledge that there are other factors in the room, and this is not a both sides thing. And unless the Republican Party carves out that cancer, then they're going to have a hard time in November.
I'll acknowledge that the Republican Party has all kinds of problems, but I think it's fair to say, though, I've always felt that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are two different sides of the same coin. They both appealed to anger. Trump on a cultural level. It was the Mexicans, the Muslims, the Chinese. They were the reason why you're miserable. Bernie Sanders, it's an economic anger. It's the rich guy. It's the chemical industry. It's the oil industry. It's the gas industry. It's pharmaceuticals. These are a lot of ordinary Americans. Democrats are struggling in industrial America because industrial America thinks that many in the Democratic Party and the far left are at war with them.
Part of what you're saying is true, but there's a big difference.
Yeah.
One of them traffics in lies and racism and bigotry, right? Especially when you look at the big election lie. and what one says about immigrants, and the other one does not do that.
Yeah,
there's a big difference there.
Yeah, let me just say right now, we're not doing
both sides.
an equal side. Yeah, we're not doing that. We're just simply saying, like, if you look at where we are now and where these parties were, they are in a much different place. Structurally, which, isn't sexy to talk about on TV, structurally, they're not in the same place as far as raising money, who controls it, what corporations are really big, what have you. I'm just saying, things are changing.
Hold that thought. I got to get to the break. Hold the thought. I got to get to the break. I'm sorry. So CNN is projecting that John Fetterman has won the Pennsylvania Democratic Senate primary, and it has been a dramatic few days after he suffered a stroke just last week. We have an update on that coming up right after this. Back now with our continuing election coverage. CNN projects Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman has won the Democratic nomination for Senate. Let's go straight to Mr. John Avlon at the Magic Wall. John, what do you have for us?
I just want to hammer home what a crushing this is. We've been looking at the Republican race for Senate all night. It's too close to call. 3 candidates splitting it up. John Fetterman from a hospital bed winning almost 60% of the vote. Connor Lamb, centrist congressman from the same area around Allegheny County, Beaver County, that Fetterman's from, people thought he would make a classic general election candidate. Fetterman knocked him across the board. So you got basically a unified Democratic Party around Fetterman for Senate, around Shapiro for governor, in contrast to this very fractured Republican Party. Fetterman doesn't neatly fit the boxes. He's very progressive on policy, but he's got this kind of blue-collar populist persona. And so it's going to be a fascinating race. But you got to say Fetterman's team crushed it tonight. And this is a pretty unified Democratic Party heading into the fall against those tough headwinds of a pendulum swing towards the Republican Party in midterms.
All right. Thank you there, sir. Let's get to Ron Brownstein, Harry Enton joining us right now. Well, Ron Brownstein is here. Ron, let's talk about that. I mean, he was obviously got sick, right? His wife noticed, right, and saved his life. What would we do without women and saving us here? What do you think? How do you think this plays out in that campaign?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think one aspect of this that's really important, hasn't been discussed much, and is also present in that Oregon race that we were talking about in the earlier segment, is that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema have discredited centrism for a lot of Democratic voters. I mean, I think, the historical calling card of the Democratic centrists, as someone was saying to me today, is that they are the ones in the end who can get things done, who can make deals, who can work across party lines. Manchin and Sinema really haven't advanced that vision of centrism. They've really been more saying no to their own party. And Trip Gabriel of the New York Times really captured this in a terrific piece on the Pennsylvania Senate race the other day. All of the Democrats voters who he talked to said, look, I don't want another Manchin, and even though Connor Lamb said he would end the filibuster for voting rights, I think too many voters felt that what the party needs, especially given what is going on in all of the red states right now with this kind of wave of socially regressive legislation, is someone who will more kind of take it to the Republicans. And the price that Manchin and Sinema have imposed on the image of centrists in the Democratic Party among Democratic voters, I think you can't underestimate, and you're seeing a reflection of it tonight. Now, look, I mean, Fetterman has ideological vulnerabilities, but as John Avlon correctly noted, his persona is very different from the kind of ideological caricature of an ivory tower liberal, which is what what usually goes along with that. And the question is whether he can, as Bakari said, can he get the African-American turnout in Philadelphia? Can he slightly reduce the cavernous Democratic deficits in the middle of the state, in what James Carville used to call the Alabama between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia? We don't know, and it's a very different race against Oz, where he can portray as a carpetbagger. Obviously, McCormick he can portray as kind of an out-of-touch rich guy, so he could be a formidable candidate. He's also, Don, an indispensable candidate for Democrats because they've got at least four really tough Senate incumbents to defend in Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and New Hampshire. And their odds of winning all of them in this environment ain't great, which means that they're going to hold the Senate. They probably got to pick up at least one Republican seat, and their best chance is clearly Pennsylvania.
Harry, I want you to weigh in here because, listen, different people show up, right, for primaries in the general, and so that we may see, more people come out in the suburbs, more people come out in the cities, and what have you. But I've been watching you talk about John Fetterman as well, an unusual candidate in many ways, very casual. I'm not sure if I've ever seen a guy in a suit, but go on, Harry.
No, I would say I'd know something about casual, being the only gentleman here without a tie. Look, here's the situation. Ron hit it very well, which is Democrats need a win here.
Yeah.
I don't really see a situation where Democrats hold the Senate if they don't win in the state of Pennsylvania. Wisconsin was spoken about earlier on in the program, but the fact is Ron Johnson is running for re-election in Wisconsin, and you don't defeat incumbents of the opposition party when the president's approval rating is at 40% in a midterm election. Now, look, John Fetterman really doesn't, though, have much of a track record running statewide, right, in a general election. He ran as the lieutenant governor for Tom Wolf, but we don't really know how voters will react to him. So I honestly, a phrase I used last night on Aaron Burnett's program is this is going to be a lot of fun, at least in terms of people like myself who watch electoral politics, because whoever the Republican nominee is, John Fetterman is so unusual and, dresses so oddly and talks in a way that a lot of Democrats don't really talk. But will that be able to get him over the top, given that he's seen as this more progressive candidate? I don't know.
Well, that's why I said he has a sort of an everyman appeal about him. And when I said, what happens? How does his illness play? Does it help or hurt him? And I mean that he is more relatable to people now. And also America loves a comeback story. If he comes back and he heals, right? So that's why I raised that question. I think it's legit.
I think it's a legit question, and we're going to see how the candidates sort of play it out. Everyone has someone in their family who's had illness at one time or the other. Yeah. And so I don't think that this is something that keeps him down as long as he's able to show that he's up to the task. And we have no reason to believe that he isn't at this particular point. So I think it's just going to be a very interesting fall campaign, regardless who the Republican nominee is.
All right, stand by, everyone. President Biden paying his respects in Buffalo at the site of the racist massacre, a mostly black neighborhood where 10 people were shot to death while shopping for groceries over the weekend, and slamming what he calls the poison of white supremacy. So listen, we have a key race alert. Look at that. Dr. Mehmet Oz increasing his lead over Dave McCormick in the Senate Republican primary in Pennsylvania. Ahead by 2,741 votes at this point. Boy, this is a nail-biter, and it won't be decided tonight. It'll probably be decided in the morning. Who knows? Maybe it'll be decided in the next few minutes while we're on the air. What do you think?
Well, I don't think it's going to be decided tonight. No, no.
But I'd rather be Dr. Oz than McCormick right now. I mean, when you're at a race like this with 94% of the vote in, and you're up 2,700 votes, that's kind of where you want to be, Joe.
I'd rather be Oz than McCormick. Absolutely.
You always want to be ahead. You always want to be ahead. Listen, we want to talk about something else that was really important that happened today, and we should talk about it. It's President Joe Biden not hesitating to call this deadly mass shooting in Buffalo, New York, an act of domestic terrorism, and he did not hesitate to call out the hateful ideology behind the shooting either.
We've seen the mass shootings in Charleston, South Carolina, El Paso, Texas, and Pittsburgh, last year in Atlanta, this week in Dallas, Texas, and now in Buffalo, New York. White supremacy is a poison. It's a poison running through it really is. Running through our body politic. And it's been allowed to fester and grow right in front of our eyes. No more. I mean, no more. We need to say as clearly and forcefully as we can that the ideology of white supremacy has no place in America.
Bakari, let's get back to the folks here in the studio. Was it important for him to give that speech and to call it is what it is?
I mean, I think it was very important. And I think that the person who displays empathy most is Joe Biden. And part of the reason that Joe Biden is president of the United States and not Donald Trump is because Donald Trump is fundamentally incapable of doing what Joe Biden did today. But in the larger, if you take a step back in the 50,000-foot view and analyzing what happened in Charleston, analyzing what happened in Atlanta, or looking at what happened in Buffalo this week, you realize that there is a void that's not being filled. And We've had a lot of conversation about demographics, Ron and Harry. We've had a lot of conversations about Democrats and Republicans, myself and Charlie and Mark and Alice. But it's weird to me that white evangelical Christians are quiet. It's weird to me that there is a group of individuals in this country who, when these things happen, take a step back. And until we really begin to look deep at what the original sins of our country are and have a conversation that's not rooted in politics. We're all political commentators, and Mark actually has one of those sophisticated titles down there, like Senior Political Analyst of all things great at CNN.
That's not even the best one. I get a better one. We'll talk about that in the 3 o'clock hour.
But if we drop those titles and we drop Democrat and Republican, you know, I'd sit back and just look at my colleagues and be like, you know, what are white folk going to do?
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, Alice, let's talk about that, because you have Republicans who have lawmakers who have promoted this, you know, this racist replacement theory, Matt Gaetz, Scott Perry. What is the responsibility, you think, of Republican leaders to get their members to stop trafficking in racism and hate?
To say stop trafficking in racism and hate and do it.
Yeah, but what does it take for them to get them to do that?
But they haven't even done that, to Alice's point.
Yeah. Well, they need to talk the talk and walk the walk. They need to go out there and condemn this type of activity. And I agree with Bakari commenting on no one better to console these victims and console the family members and the first responder than Joe Biden. He's been there, he's felt pain before, and he did a tremendous job showing empathy to them and making a clear point that this is an act of domestic terrorism, which should be punished accordingly, but also talking about this being a racially motivated hate crime and doing so in a way we're talking about this is the act, racial hatred of a minority of people of this country that should not dominate and dictate how the rest of this country acts. And the key thing is this, whether you're Republican or Democrat, white or black, we cannot tolerate this. And this is a situation where we need to take the politics out of this and go against people that are engaging and acting out on such racial hatred. It's not a partisan issue. This is an issue that just needs to stop.
But it is domestic terror. I mean, it's hard to say that it's not a partisan. Well, it's not a partisan issue. It shouldn't be politics. But the people who are trafficking in it, if you were to, this goes back to, you were saying that the Democratic Party has changed, the Republican Party has changed. But if you look at just quite honestly on the Democratic side, people who are, you may say, think are far left, they don't get elected to office as much as these like far right extremist people who traffic in the stuff on the right side. It's not the same. To the point that you were trying to make, we're not both sides in this. This is different. Republicans, extremists, or Republicans are trafficking in this, and some Republicans, but it has become. It's not just the extremes in their party. The moderates in the party, the people who should know better, aren't saying anything.
What I think is happening right now, and this is where I feel for Alice and Charlie and Republicans that I grew up with, in Washington, where a good heart, policies may not agree with Bakari, but can go out and have a beer with Bakari afterwards. Right. I think what's happening right now is that the Republican leaders, some Republican leaders have lost control of the party, and they're never going to get back. To your point, some Republican leaders have embraced this and are using it to their advantage to try to get power.
We'll be right back, Charlie. We'll be right back. A night of major drama this election night. The tightest races, Pennsylvania's GOP Senate primary. Trump-endorsed TV doc Mehmet Oz now increasing his lead over hedge fund guy Dave McCormick. But it's so close. We may have days to go until we've got a winner. So make sure you stay tuned to CNN for all the latest. Thanks for watching, everyone. Our live coverage continues with Rosemary Church.
Hello and welcome to our viewers joining us here in the United States and all around the world. You are watching Election Night in America, CNN's special coverage of the midterm primaries. And I'm Rosemary Church. Well, this is the biggest election night in the U.S. so far this year. These 5 states are holding primaries, some of which have been filled with twists and turns. The results of these elections will decide which candidates appear on state ballots in the November midterms. And those results, in turn, will determine whether Democrats lose their slim majorities in the House and Senate. Tonight's votes, while local, are also considered a referendum on the performance of U.S. President Joe Biden and the lingering power of former President Donald Trump. Well, the marquee race of the night, the Republican Senate showdown in the swing state of Pennsylvania, which is going right down to the wire. Trump's pick, TV doctor Mehmet Oz, was deemed the frontrunner in what became a 3-way contest. Oz is now neck and neck with pro-business Republican Dave McCormick, and this race is still too close to call. Surging long shot conservative Kathy Barnett appears to be out of contention at this point. In the Democratic battle for U.S. Senate, John Fetterman will get the nomination despite being in the hospital since last week. The lieutenant governor had a stroke and underwent surgery to install a pacemaker with a defibrillator. But it's that expensive Republican Senate showdown that's capturing the most attention in Pennsylvania. The 2 leading candidates addressed their supporters earlier. Take a listen.
Unfortunately, we're not going to have resolution tonight, but we can see the path ahead. We can see victory ahead, and it's all because of you.
We are making a ferocious charge, but when it's this close, what else would you expect? Everything about this campaign has been tight.
And CNN's Kristen Holmes picks up the story from Pittsburgh.
Now, while the McCormick campaign watched that margin between he and Mehmet Oz grow smaller and smaller tonight, they tell me that they are still cautiously optimistic. They like the way the map is trending. They tell me that in areas that they thought that Oz would do better, they are actually overperforming. In areas they thought they'd do well, they were doing just about as well as they thought. And in areas where Oz is doing well, it was things that they had anticipated, given the fact that that area is Trump country. They're looking at these mail-in ballots, and they still feel like they are going to take this race. But again, it is a razor-thin margin, and it looks like it could be anyone's game. Kristen Holmes at McCormick headquarters in Pittsburgh.
And now to CNN's Jeff Zeleny reporting from Oz campaign headquarters in Newtown, Pennsylvania.
In the critical suburbs outside of Philadelphia, Dr. Mehmet Oz came out in the final minutes of Election Day and said this race would go forward. There are critical votes to be counted, largely here in Bucks County and other suburban areas of Philadelphia, as well as other pockets across the state. This race, of course, too close to call. Election Day could become election week in the hard-fought battle between Dr. Oz and David McCormick. But Dr. Oz projected optimism and confidence as he addressed supporters.
We're not going to have a result tonight. When all the votes are tallied, I am confident we will win.
And Dr. Oz also thanked his political patron, former President Donald Trump, who, of course, his endorsement pulled him to the finish line, if not over the finish line. That will be seen in the next day, perhaps the coming days. Kathy Barnett, the 3rd candidate who is really surging over the last week or so, no longer in contention as a winner, but her support in some of these counties could be key in the fight against Oz and McCormick. So this race is largely ending as it began, in a vicious 2-man battle between Oz and McCormick. Some $70 million spent in the Senate race here in Pennsylvania that now is headed into overtime. Jeff Zeleny, CNN, Newtown, Pennsylvania.
And I want to bring in CNN political commentator and Republican strategist Alice Stewart in New York and Democratic strategist Caroline Heldman in Los Angeles. Welcome to you both.
Hi, Rosemary. Great to be here.
Great to be here.
So this was the biggest primary night so far this year, and many watched for the winners and losers to learn who would end up on the ballot for the midterms, of course, and many also wanted to assess Donald Trump's power as kingmaker. So let's start with the race that's too close to call in the Pennsylvania GOP Senate primary, where Trump-endorsed candidate, celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz, is locked in this tight race with Dave McCormick. Right-wing activist Kathy Barnett is trailing, but clearly played a critical role here taking votes away from Oz, who she accused of being a liberal. So, Alice, what is your reading of where this is going, and how nervous would Trump be right now?
Look, it's important to keep in mind Pennsylvania is a very purple state, which it's very in the middle in terms of Republican and Democrat. Donald Trump lost this state in 2020, so that says a lot about his sway as we head into the general election. Here's my concern, Rosemary, is that Republicans need to spend more time focusing on candidates that can win in the general election, more moderate Republican candidates as opposed to Trump Republican candidates. And that's my fear with what we're seeing with someone like Oz or even Barnett being too far to the right. Because what's going to happen is the concern is how are they going to pivot? How are they going to come appeal to independents and undecided voters of Pennsylvania as we head into the general election? As you said, this is very tight. I don't anticipate having a Republican nominee named for several days because I expect there to be recounts. There should be challenges of this. But as it stands right now, I feel as a rational Republican, we would be in much better spot with someone who's a little bit more conservative or moderate as Republican, someone like McCormick, as opposed to Oz as we head into the general election.
Of course, it could go either way at this point. So, Caroline, whichever GOP candidate wins, Oz or McCormick, they will go up against Democrat John Fetterman, who easily won his primary race, but of course had a pacemaker implanted Tuesday after suffering a stroke on Friday. How will Fetterman likely fare up against either one of these two GOP candidates in the November midterms, do you think?
Well, I very much agree with Alice that the GOP needs to choose a candidate that is more centrist, and McCormick would certainly be that candidate. But boy, did they dodge a bullet with Kathy Barnett. She would have been way out of step with the purple voters in the state of Pennsylvania. And I think in the general election, which of course is 8 months away, who knows how this health issue will play out. But John Fetterman is a very popular candidate. He's a populist candidate. He somehow managed to maintain authenticity and run as an outsider, even though he's lieutenant governor. This is somebody who supports background checks, which about 90% of Americans do. He also supports legalizing marijuana. So he's got which about 60% of Americans support. So he has, a really interesting approach. I think it's going to be a very tight race either way, given that this really is a purple state. As Alice pointed out, Trump wins in 2016, loses in 2020, both by very small margins. So it's really anyone's race heading into November.
All right, and of course, so we have a lot to cover, so I want my panel just to stand by for a moment. We'll come back to you in just a tick. So the Trump-backed Republican nominee for Pennsylvania governor will be Doug Mastriano. The state senator is a champion of the big lie that the 2020 presidential election was rigged, and if Mastriano becomes governor in November, he will have control over the state's electors in the 2024 presidential election. His Democratic opponent has already called him a dangerous extremist who would restrict the vote and spread conspiracy theories. Take a listen.
They like to call people who stand on the Constitution far right and extreme. I repudiate that. That is crap. That is absolutely not true. Actually, their party, which the media stands for and advocates for, they've gone extreme. So on day one, any mandates are gone. On day one, any jab for job requirements are gone. On day one, CRT is over.
CRT, of course, stands for critical race theory, which focuses on historical patterns of racism and how they affect minorities. So let's go back to our panel now on this. And, this was a big win for Donald Trump in Pennsylvania's GOP governor's race with his pick, Doug Mastriano, we just heard there, coming out on top. But Alice, could Mastriano end up being more of a liability for Republicans in the end, with his support of Trump's big election lie and all his other extreme right views when he goes up against Democrat Josh Shapiro in November?
I'm afraid I think he will be a liability. He is too extreme. He is too far to the right. people in Pennsylvania and most people in this country do not like when people are running for office saying that the election process is not valid and there is rigged elections. People don't like that. And this is one of the cornerstone of his campaign. And that's not going to fare well with people across the state of Pennsylvania. And conversely, he's running against a candidate, Josh Shapiro, who is well liked in the state, and he does appeal to people across Pennsylvania. So this is going to be a very interesting race to watch. I think Mastriano was Republicans' worst fear as the winner tonight, and unfortunately that came true. He's going to have a very difficult time, if not impossible time, switching to a more moderate candidate and appealing to a broader electorate in Pennsylvania. So time will tell how this plays out, but this is going to be a race that's going to be, in my view, difficult for the Republican candidate.
Right. And Caroline, the worry, of course, for Democrats is that if Mastriano wins in November against Josh Shapiro and becomes the governor of Pennsylvania, he would have control over the state's electors in the 2024 presidential election. How much do you worry that he would try to alter the outcome if he were to be governor?
Well, this is a man who led the effort to overturn the election in Pennsylvania, a free and fair election. This is a man who was at the violent insurrection on January 6th. He says that he left before the violence began, but I bet a lot of information is going to come out about his participation now that he has advanced to the general election. I think that his winning the Republican primary is really a gift to Democrats. Again, this is a purple state, and Trump endorsing him because he advanced the big lie is exactly the reason why I think he is a political liability for the Republicans in this state. And Pennsylvania is a really important state. You can't win the Electoral College without Pennsylvania. So election integrity is going to be an issue that a lot of voters will prioritize in November. And if they're choosing, who supports the big lie versus who's going to protect elections, they're going to vote Josh Shapiro. They're going to vote for the Democratic candidate.
Right, and I'll come back to my panel in just a moment. North Carolina Congressman Madison Cawthorn has lost his re-election bid. The freshman Republican lawmaker conceded the primary to his opponent, State Senator Chuck Edwards. Once thought of as a rising star, Cawthorn repeatedly found himself mired in scandal and controversy. Voters don't appear to have followed former President Donald Trump's urging to give Cawthorn a second chance. So let's take a closer look at this. I want to bring my panel back up. So not great news for Donald Trump in that North Carolina House primary, with his endorsed candidate, Madison Cawthorn, conceding to Chuck Edwards pretty early in the night, actually, after Republicans turned on Cawthorn in response to his very long list of embarrassing missteps. But Trump doubled down on his support for Cawthorn, didn't he? Even calling on voters and the party to give him a second chance. So he shares in this big loss, doesn't he? Alice, to you first.
He does, and I think he had a second chance and a third chance and a fourth chance and many. However, he continued to make the same mistakes, make embarrassing statements, make awful claims about his colleagues on the Hill that they invited him to orgies and did drugs, and that right there got him on the wrong side of his colleagues, and that is never a place you want to be. He had colleagues in North Carolina urging for him to be removed from his current seat and campaigning vehemently against him as an incumbent. That's a very difficult spot to be in. And not only that, he really frustrated his own constituents. He had run in one district in North Carolina, then jumped to another district that he felt would be more politically advantageous to him, and then came back to another district. So a lot of constituents felt as though he turned his back on them for his own political benefit. And those are all factors that I think played into why he didn't win. Look, he's young. He will soon learn the error of his ways. I think we have not seen the last of Madison Cawthorn, but he does need to go away and try and, in my view, grow up a little bit before he does decide to come back.
He certainly learned a lot of lessons Tuesday night, if not before. So, Caroline, what is your response to the hit Trump's endorsement power took from this loss specifically?
Well, it's interesting. You know, Trump likes to jump in on races late and endorse candidates he thinks are going to win. So his record is a winning record, but you know, it depends upon the race. It's hard to say what his influence is. With Madison Cawthorn, you know, this is a cautionary tale of what happens when you're out of step with your party in terms of temperament, and also out of step with your party in terms of policy. This is a man who went to Congress, as Alice pointed out. He disrespected elders in the party. He also went against the party line. This is a man who, you know, had multiple allegations of sexual violence. He twice tried to take a gun onto a plane. This is a man who gets pulled over, has a license that's out of date. Just a constant series of scandals. But how do we know about this, and how do we know about them right near the end of the election? This was the Republican Party teaching the party a lesson about what happens when you step out of line. And this is what the parties do. It's not specific to Republicans, but boy, what an ugly flame out. I've never seen anything like it. How to ruin your political career in 2 years.
Yeah, it has been extraordinary to watch, no doubt about it. Caroline Heldman, Alice Stewart, many thanks to you both for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosemary.
And our election night coverage of the US midterm primaries resumes in just a moment. Plus, after months of brutal fighting, the battle for the Ukrainian city of Mariupol is nearing its end. But in order to take the city, Russian forces had to destroy it. We will have the latest on the other side of the break. Stay with us. More now on our top story, Tuesday's U.S. midterm election primaries. The critical Republican primary in Pennsylvania for Senate is still too close to call. Trump-backed celebrity doctor Mehmet Oz is facing off against former hedge fund CEO David McCormick and conservative activist Kathy Barnett. Both Oz and McCormick addressed their supporters earlier, with each of them predicting victory once all the votes are counted. CNN senior data reporter Harry Enton has more now on why the race between McCormick and Oz remains so very close.
There's a real difference that we have seen between the early vote and then the election day vote. If, in fact, there is still some absentee ballots to be counted, what you saw earlier on in the evening was essentially that Oz was trailing in that race. He caught up as we went on. So McCormick was doing better in that early vote. If there's still a lot of that vote left, yes, we're seeing some squeezing right now. Yes, it is too close to call. But the fact is, Dave McCormick has led at every single point in this evening. You'd rather be him than Mehmet Oz. But again, there's a reason why we haven't called. This thing is tight as a tick. It's ridiculously close.
And we will have much more on the primaries in just a few minutes when I'll be joined by our senior political analyst, Ron Brownstein. Well, Ukraine's decision to end its combat mission in Mariupol effectively cedes control of the city to Russian troops. It's a strategic win for Russia, but one that came at a staggeringly high cost to Ukrainian civilians. CNN's Ivan Watson has our report.
A patriotic Ukrainian hymn echoes from beneath Mariupol. Here we go into the battle of life, they sing, hard and durable, unbreakable as granite. These were the final few Ukrainian defenders left battling the Russian war machine in a sprawling steelworks. Rock-hard resolve was needed because above their heads has been described as hell on earth. 2.5 months ago, President Putin announced a so-called special military operation. Russia had loomed over Mariupol since 2014. The constant fear of a Russian invasion was part of everyday life. CNN was in the city the day the war began.
We spoke with one woman who's been trying banks all across town. She said her kids are waiting in the car. She wants to leave with her family.
At ATMs, residents lined up for hours for cash. Meanwhile, Ukraine mobilized for the coming onslaught. As Russia laid siege, images were slow to trickle out. But gradually, the world learned of horrors. crude burials for fallen bystanders. Satellite images showed destroyed residential areas. The ferocious aerial assault. And then this, a huge bombing at a maternity unit. People carrying pregnant women from the building. This image beamed around the world, a mother and unborn baby who would later die. President Zelensky called it genocide. Russia, on the other hand, denied it bombed the building at all and called it a staged provocation. This theater was a cultural symbol of Mariupol, located right in the heart of the city, serving as a safe haven for women and children trapped by the bombardment. In an effort to keep themselves safe from above, they wrote the Russian word for children, "Дети," on the ground. But the indiscriminate nature of Russia's war unleashed another unspeakable tragedy.
We're running, but Russians bombed it. So we running from the theater, and bombs was like this.
Ukrainian officials later said that at least 300 people died in the airstrike. But it has been at this imposing steel plant, Azovstal, 11 square kilometers of pipes, tunnels, and chimney stacks, where Mariupol's final resolve was forged. Soldiers and hundreds of civilians, including at least 30 children, crammed together deep underground as Russian forces pounded the facility. President Putin urged his defense minister to seal off the site.
Close off the industrial site so that not even a fly can escape.
These recorded messages provided updates from beneath the surface and a vow that surrender is not an option.
And the surrender for us is unacceptable because we cannot grant such a big gift to the enemy.
Multiple failed humanitarian corridors meant that only around 100 civilians were able to escape. Those that did found comfort in the arms of relatives. Anna was reunited with her brother. Her Azovstal ordeal may be over, but emotional scars remain.
Now when there are lots of noise, I have like a reflex to hide myself, you know.
During the final days of resistance in Mariupol, Russian bombardment of Azovstal intensified from the skies, the sea, and the land. 2 fighters in the plant married, but she was widowed 3 days later. At last, the bombing stopped. The hundreds of defenders still clinging on walked or were carried out into Russian custody. The fall of Mariupol, a watershed moment in this war. The fury wrought on the city is textbook Putin. And the list of cities he has flattened continues to grow. Grozny, Aleppo, and now Mariupol. Ivan Watson, CNN.
Our election night coverage of the US midterm primaries resumes in just a moment. Coming up, we will have the latest on key races to watch and how they might shape control of Congress. Those stories and more when we return.
We love you. We're going to take back this state. We're going to take back this country, and it's because of you.
When all the votes are tallied, I am confident we will win.
Well, what is probably the tightest primary race in the US right now is between those 2 men you just heard from. Former hedge fund executive Dave McCormick trails TV doctor Mehmet Oz by less than 3,000 votes in the Pennsylvania Republican race for US Senate. Oz is backed by former President Donald Trump. Now, whichever Republican wins, they will face Democrat John Fetterman, Pennsylvania's lieutenant governor, in November's general election. So CNN senior political analyst Ron Brownstein is going to join me now from Los Angeles, and we'll take a closer look at all of this. Always great to have you with us.
Hey, Rosemary. Good to be here.
So let's start with that very tight race in the Pennsylvania GOP Senate primary, with Trump-endorsed candidate Mehmet Oz fighting for the lead against Dave McCormick. Whoever wins, of course, will go up against Democrat John Fetterman, who enjoyed an easy win despite his health issues. How do you expect this to play out, and what could it mean for November, do you think?
Well, several points. First, this is an absolutely indispensable race for Democrats in November. You know, midterm elections through American history are tough for the party holding the White House, are especially tough when the president's approval rating is depressed, as Joe Biden's is now. And that means Democrats are going to be on the defensive in most places in November. They have 4 Senate incumbents who are facing very tough races in Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and New Hampshire, and potentially even Colorado. In this environment, Rosemary, it's hard to imagine they're going to win all of those races, which means if they have any real chance of holding the Senate, it will require them to win Pennsylvania, which is their best chance to pick up a seat now held by Republicans. Pat Toomey, the incumbent Republican, is retiring. This is going to be a close race. As I think Alice said before in an earlier segment, you know, Pennsylvania is a very close state. And against either McCormick or Oz, it is going to, I think, be a close contest. But most Democrats think they probably have a better chance of beating Oz, who is vulnerable on a lot of different fronts, including being kind of a carpetbagger coming back to the states, flip-flopping on a lot of issues. McCormick might be tougher as a general election candidate, but Fetterman is such an unusual profile, a kind of a blue-collar populist, a big guy, that the matchups are harder to predict with him than they might be with a more conventional candidate.
Yeah, understood. And Ron, the GOP primary races offer an opportunity, of course, to assess Trump's endorsement power.
Right.
And we saw the former president enjoy a big win in Pennsylvania's GOP governor's primary race, where Doug Mastriano came out on top. But will Mastriano's extreme right-wing views and, of course, his support of Trump's big election lie help or hinder him in November when he goes up against Democrat Josh Shapiro? What do you think?
Well, yeah, first of all, I think that the issue of who Trump endorsed is probably less revealing of where the Republican Party is going than the question of which candidates endorse Trump. Right? I mean, Trump's own personal scorecard tonight was kind of mixed. Mastriano won the governor primary in Pennsylvania. His candidate won the Senate primary in North Carolina, but his preferred candidate did not oust the incumbent governor in Idaho. And obviously, as we're saying, in the Pennsylvania Senate race is a photo finish toss-up. Yet what I think is more revealing is how many candidates tried to wrap themselves in the mantle of Trump. Even David McCormick, who is now in this neck-and-neck race with Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania. Trump called him a liberal Wall Street Republican, and yesterday he went on Breitbart Radio, which is a very conservative website, and spent half an hour praising President Trump, describing himself essentially as a warrior for the America First agenda, and promising to go to Washington to uphold that. I mean, that's what I think what we are seeing is that the Trump wing of the party is clearly the dominant wing in these primaries, as it was in Ohio, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. But one impact of that is your question about Mastriano. This is a very good environment for Republicans. There are going to be Trump-endorsed candidates who are going to win in November, but it's also possible the people he has picked will be too extreme even for this climate and this environment. There's that risk in Georgia, there's that risk in Arizona, and there's certainly that risk in Pennsylvania with Mastriano, who is not only an election denier and someone who wants to repeal the state law allowing mail balloting on demand. He is a candidate who wants to ban abortion at 6 weeks without exceptions for rape and incest, and that is I think, a very tough proposition to sell in a truly purple state like Pennsylvania.
Yeah, good point. And bad news, of course, for Donald Trump in the North Carolina GOP House primary race, where his endorsed candidate Madison Cawthorn lost to Chuck Edwards due to a very long list of embarrassing missteps. Why do you think Trump doubled down on his support for Cawthorn, even calling for him to be given a second chance? And how does all this reflect back on Trump?
Yeah, look, I think Trump's choices are idiosyncratic and based on his sense of personal loyalty to him. Plus, he definitely has an affinity for celebrity. I mean, why did he pick Oz in Pennsylvania as someone who has, until recently expressed liberal views on a whole lot of social issues that are important to the Trump base? I think, Trumpism, for Trump, loyalty is a one-way street. And candidates who he thinks are loyal to him, he is going to endorse. He is not really really about maximizing the party's chances in November. He is about maximizing his personal control over the party. And I think, you know, the part that can get lost in all of this is that whatever happens to Trump's personal influence, the value of his personal stamp of approval in the party, Trumpism is consolidating its advantage among Republicans in the Republican primary electorate in this season. You see the remnants of the conservative opposition to Trump. Essentially, Sarah Longwell, one of the leaders in that, tweeted the other day, you know, I used to think the party could be weaned from Trump or he could be excised from the party. I no longer believe that. It's metastasized across the party. Trumpism is here to stay in the Republican Party. That has big implications for the competition with Democrats. It also has big implications for small d American democracy, since so many of the candidates he is endorsing are essentially not only election deniers in terms of 2020, but threatening to undermine the election of 2024.
Ron Brownstein, always great to get your analysis. Many thanks.
Thanks for having me.
And still to come, US President Joe Biden tries to comfort those who lost loved ones in the racially motivated shooting in Buffalo. More on his visit just ahead. An emotional day in Buffalo, New York, where US President Joe Biden met with grief-stricken families days after 10 people were killed in a hate-fueled racist shooting. Mr. Biden and the First Lady paying their respects and leaving flowers for the victims of Saturday's shooting at a supermarket, targeted, police say, because it was in a predominantly black neighborhood. The president called the mass shooting an act of domestic terrorism and condemned the racist ideology of the suspected shooter.
Jill and I bring you this message from deep in our nation's soul. In America, evil will not win, I promise you. Hate will not prevail, and white supremacy will not have the last word. White supremacy is a poison. It's a poison.
Those comments coming as we learn troubling new details about the 18-year-old suspected shooter. He legally obtained an AR-15 style rifle, believed to be the same weapon he described modifying in a racist statement posted online before the attack. Law enforcement officials say there appeared to be no red flags that would have prevented him from obtaining the 3 guns found in his possession. And in a statement to CNN, the communication service Discord said the suspect made his online chat logs visible to some people about 30 minutes before the shooting began. Well, still to come, imagine offering to sell your child to avoid starvation. CNN's Christiane Amanpour reports on a dire situation in Afghanistan where extreme poverty and hunger threaten millions. Welcome back, everyone. Well, it has been 9 months since America's withdrawal from Afghanistan, and a new Pentagon report warns ISIS-K remains a threat, ramping up attacks in Afghanistan and Pakistan. But hunger and crippling poverty also threaten millions of Afghans. Our chief international anchor, Christiane Amanpour, recently traveled to Kabul, and she reports now from a country reeling under economic collapse.
Under a scorching sun, standing patiently for hours in organized lines, hundreds of newly poor Afghans wait for their monthly handout. Men on one side, women on the other. Here, the UN's World Food Programme is delivering cash assistance, the equivalent of $43 per family. Khalid Ahmadzai is the coordinator. He says he's seen the need explode, and right from the start, the stories are dire.
A few days ago, one woman came to me, and she told me that I want to give you my son by 16,000 Afghani. Just give me the Afghani. And she was really crying, and that was the worst feeling that I had in my life.
Are you serious?
Yeah, this is a serious thing that we had a distribution at the first day. So the hunger is too much high here.
You know, we've heard those stories, but I've never heard it from somebody who's actually seen it.
I have seen it. It's too much better, and it hurts me a lot.
Everyone we met is hurting. According to the International Rescue Committee, almost half the population of Afghanistan lives on less than one meal a day. And the UN says nearly 9 million people risk famine-like conditions. Farishte has 5 kids.
And how many meals per day can you eat?
When you don't have money, she tells us, when you don't have a job, you don't have income, would you be able to eat proper food when there's no work? Khotima is a widow. They should let us work because we have to become the men of the family so we can find bread for the children. None of my 6 kids have shoes, and with 3,000 Afghanis, what will I be able to do in 6 months' time?
You just want work.
I have to work, she says. At this WFP distribution site in Kabul, you do see women working, and women mostly with their faces uncovered. Outside, Taliban slogans plastered over the blast walls tout victory over the Americans and claim to be of the people for the people. But while security has improved since they took over, the country is facing economic collapse. And that shows up all over the tiny bodies we see at the Indira Gandhi Children's Hospital. It's the biggest in Afghanistan, now heaving under the extra weight. Dr. Mohammed Yaqub Sharafat tells us that 20 to 30% of the babies in this neonatal ward are malnourished. Suddenly, he rushes to the side of one who's stopped breathing. For 5 minutes, we watched him pump his heart until he comes back to life. But for how long? Even in the womb, the decks are stacked against them.
From one side, the mothers are not getting well nutrition.
Wow, so it's a triple whammy. The mothers aren't nourished enough.
Yeah.
The economy is bad. They have too many children. And they're overworking themselves.
So all these factors together make this situation to they give birth premature babies.
Because they're under sanctions, the Taliban are struggling to pay salaries. So the International Committee of the Red Cross pays all the doctors and nurses at this hospital and at 32 others across the country. That's about 10,000 health workers in all.
Look at this child. He's 2.5 years old.
His name is Mohammed. He's malnourished.
How much food is she able to give her child at home? Why does he look like this?
His mother says she's had nothing but breast milk to feed him, but now can't afford enough to eat to keep producing even that. It's the same for Shazia. Her 7-month-old baby has severe pneumonia, but at least she gets fed here at the hospital so that she can breastfeed her daughter. Back home, we don't have this kind of food, unfortunately, she says. If we have food for lunch, we don't have anything for dinner.
While we're here, the electricity's gone out.
It happens all the time, the director tells us. We watch a doctor carry on by the light of a mobile phone until the electricity comes back. We end this day in the tiniest dwellings amongst the poorest of Kabul's poor. Waliullah and Basmina have 6 children, while she prepares their meal of eggs, 2 small bowls of beans and 2 flatbreads. The 8- and 10-year-old are out scavenging waste paper to sell and polishing shoes. It's their only income since Waliullah injured his back and can no longer work as a laborer. He tells us their 10-month-old baby is malnourished. I always worry and stress about this, says Basmina. But she tells her kids, God will be kind to us one day. Christiana Manpour, CNN, Kabul, Afghanistan.
And thank you so much for your company. I'm Rosemary Church. Our special Election Night in America coverage continues after this short break. You're watching CNN.